Welcome to the Arlington County Transportation Commission. This is our February 4th, 2021 meeting. I'll turn this over to the chair for a few good words.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We have a couple nice meaty items on the agenda today. I did want to share with the commission that I got word Commissioner Raddick will not be joining us this evening as his wife is being induced at Virginia Hospital Center. So sometime this evening or tomorrow morning, there should be a new member of Commissioner Raddick's household to keep him out of trouble.
What a slacker.
So, all right. But beyond that, whenever you're ready, Mr. Best, I think we're ready to get started.
Okay, item 1 is citizen comment on matters not on the agenda, and we have no speakers for this item. Item 2 is the Arlington County towing amendments, and we have Ben Aiken here this evening to give a staff overview.
Thank you, Richard, and hello, Commissioners. My name is Ben Aiken. I'm the Director of Constituent Services in the County Manager's Office, and I just really want to briefly introduce myself and my team in Constituent Services. For those of you, excuse me, who don't know, we are housed in the County Manager's Office, and we do a few things, including directing attention to issues that surface at the level of county manager and county board. We help individual constituents get answers for residents, businesses, and otherwise to get answers to their questions and responsive action to various services that they may be requesting. And we are really we're a venue for anyone to come and seek such assistance. We also provide a liaison role to public utilities, including our government affairs and external affairs contacts at Washington Gas and Dominion Energy. And finally, we service consumer affairs, and as part of consumer affairs, that includes a staff liaison role to the Trespass Towing Advisory Board, or TTAB. And that is why we are here tonight. And my colleague, Caitlin Thomas, joins me, and she will be giving a presentation on the ordinance changes that we are bringing to you as an informational item. So we're bringing the item to you tonight, again, largely as informational and at the request of the county board following their action on the request to advertise these changes at their January meeting. As you all likely understand, private towers operate as a component of the parking management at privately owned and operated parking lots. So that presented a nexus to the role of the Transportation Commission, and again is the reason why we bring this item to you for essentially your information and comment and question as necessary. So I will turn it over to Caitlin. If you don't have any questions for me about constituent services, I'll just leave it to her to handle the towing side of this.
Thank you, Ben. Hi, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. As Ben said, we are from the County Manager's Office. I'm Caitlin Thomas, and we are among many other things, we are co-towing staff coordinators. And I'm here to present a brief presentation. I'll run through this pretty quickly. And basically just want to show you the proposed amendments to the towing ordinance. We are looking for feedback from this group, as these changes will be up for consideration at this month's county board meeting on February 20th. So just a quick, what is trespass towing? Trespass towing is a private industry in which is governed by contracts between property owners and towing operators. The county's role is only regulatory, and we do not collect any fees. Who is the Trespass Towing Advisory Board, or the TTAB, as it's commonly known? It consists of 7 members. That we have 3 from the police department, 3 towing operators, and 1 citizen. The TTAB is required to meet once a year to review the ordinance and to make recommendations to the county board. So currently, our present issue, staff is offering recommendations and changes to the county board after they were reviewed by TTAB and staff. The purpose of amending our towing ordinance is really threefold. We want to reconcile portions of the ordinance with the Virginia State Code. We want to enhance consumer protections and also increase maximum towing fees. I will jump into those 3 buckets now. So the first, we have Regarding changes to Reconcile with state code, language was added to confirm that trespass towing ordinance does not apply to police, fire, public health, or wrecked vehicles. The definition of agent was added, as well as language to confirm that, to clarify that written authorization is not needed if a written contract is already in place. And the current fine for the violation of this ordinance of $1,000 is unenforceable because the county has not been given that authority by the state, and therefore it's recommended to be removed. And in place of that, a Class 4 misdemeanor, which is a $250 fine, will be added, is proposed to be added for any violation of the code. So these reconciliations all come from our state code. The second bucket, we have requirements for, this is our consumer protection bucket. The requirements on towing signage have been simplified. Duplicative wording was consolidated to avoid confusion. The intent of this change is for signs to clearly state when towing is in effect. The requirements for storage facilities were strengthened. This includes adequate lighting, a physical structure for accepting payments, allowing the breakdown of fees to be displayed in a written list, which would satisfy the signage requirement, and not requiring the storage lot to be open if there are not any vehicles stored from the county, from Arlington County. Under transparency and accountability, a requirement for towing operators to display placards on their rear windows is recommended. These placards would clearly display all towing fees. This is mostly relevant to situations in which a resident can recover their vehicle before it's removed from its parked location. Also, a requirement for receipts to include the email and postal address of the towing operator was added. And if requested by the vehicle owner, information about the person or persons who authorized the tow from the towing contract, as well as photographs, is now required to be sent via mail or email. And then for our last bucket of towing fee changes, per state code, the definition of immobilization was added to include barnacles and to allow for a $25 removal fee. And I get this question a lot of what is a barnacle, so I'll just click over there real quick. So now these are allowed, or if it's adopted, these will be allowed to be used in the county for a $25 removal fee. So let's jump back. The TTAB has voted unanimously to recommend the base tow fee be increased from the current maximum of $135 to the state permitted maximum of $150. Along with the base tow fee, the additional fees for nights, weekends, and holidays are being recommended to be increased from 25 to 30. I want to note that there are no more than 2 additional fees can be charged at one time. This will effectively increase the total maximum tow fee from $185 to $210, and that's if the tow occurs during those times when 2 fees can be charged. The county manager has recommended reducing the in lieu of tow fee, or commonly known as the drop fee, which is when a resident is able to retrieve their car before it is towed away, from $25 to $10. The TTAB has been apprised of this recommendation, but has not formally met or voted on it. We actually are meeting next week. This recommendation is made to benefit consumers while also considering the impact to the towing industry. The change is considered reasonable and fair due to minimal expected operational and fiscal impacts in the towing industry. We're almost there. So as far as public engagement is concerned, we had 2 virtual TTAB meetings in 2020, when only one is required by state code and no public comment was heard. We have disseminated the proposed changes to the towing listserv, which has a little over 1,000 recipients. We have reached out to the Chamber of Commerce and walked through the proposal with them directly. We are having a TTAB meeting again. We're having one more next week, like I said, and we're going to solicit their input on the manager's proposed change to the drop fee, or in lieu of towing. And there is a potential for fiscal impact due to fines issued for violation, but we can't provide an estimate, and staff believes it would be negligible. All the towing fees mentioned, except for the misdemeanor charge, are private transactions and the county's role is regulatory. And that concludes my presentation. I will take questions or comments.
Great, thank you very much. Go ahead and kick things off here. I think for the most part, it's a great set of updates. I think my main concerns and questions are around the increase in the tow fee. Just to start things off, can you tell us when the tow fee was last raised?
It was 2014. It was raised from 125 to 135.
All right, so 7 years is what we're talking about here. All right, and then I see the main justification, at least that I saw in the staff report, is this attachment B, some anonymized data from some towing companies.
Yes.
Which is a little, I'll be honest, a little scattershot. It covers a range of different years, a number of different types of costs, and some of it seems not particularly useful without some additional information. So like, for instance, one of these is an annual insurance premium rising pretty precipitously, but it's kind of hard to understand how else the business changed in those years. If they, doubled the number of tow trucks that they had in those years, then you would expect the insurance premium to go up like that. Is there any additional information or detail that you base, sorry, I should actually back that up a little bit. Is staff recommending the increase, or is it just TTAB recommending the increase?
TTAB voted and recommended the increase, and the county manager and staff are supporting that increase.
Supporting that increase.
Yes, and I can speak a little bit too. I understand your concern. I understand, it may not be a complete picture of the financial, status, but it's more than we've ever gotten before. And it's not really meant to, it's not meant to be a study. It's not meant to capture the entire industry. It's what was provided, and we took what, we took it and did what we could, and it convinced, then the TTAB membership found it to be enough justification to agree to recommend raising the tow fee to the maximum state level.
All right, thank you. I'm going to jump to some other commissioners, and then I might have some more questions after I hear from them. Commissioner Price, I think your hand was up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, just out of curiosity, do we have figures on how many cars are actually towed in Arlington annually, monthly? And also, I just have a question. How does the drop fee work? Is it paid on site? Are you billed for that? Explain to me a little bit about that process.
Sure. So the drop fee, yes, it's on site. You pay when, if you see your tow being towed away, or your car being towed away, you can essentially try to stop it, and they will take the car off, and you pay in the field right then and there. And also when it comes, I have the numbers for how many tows were in the county. So I have it. I can pull those up. Actually, give me 1 second.
As you're pulling that up, the drop fee is so you're only going to incur a $10 fee if the car needs to be dropped. Is that based on what we're seeing here? That there's not going to be $150 plus $10, or is it going to be?
Oh, right. No, it would just be right now it's just $25. If this goes forward, it will just be $10, not on top.
Okay.
So in 2019, we had a total of 778 tows, so almost 15,000 tows. And then in 2020, we had a total of 12,428.
Great, thank you.
Great. Commissioner Buck is up next.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm kind of a rookie on this issue. I've thankfully never been towed, but help me out maybe a little bit based on your discussion, especially with the operator side, about the drop fee. My concern, again, being a rookie, is that paying the drop fee is kind of the best of both worlds. It's, the enforcement has taken place, the private space is protected, person gets their car back on site for a nominal fee. If we lower the cost from 25 to 10, I worry that we're sort of removing a bit of an incentive for that on-site operator to engage in the collaborative dance that must take place for somebody to get their car dropped from a car that's already been hooked up. Could you has that discussion come up, and do you think that's a legitimate concern? It's just sort of a human behavioral microeconomics type concern that I have.
Right. No, I understand. I think so. I think staff is, and the TTAB felt, well, TTAB hasn't seen this, sorry. But staff feels that it will, let me back up. So we've gotten reports from the towers that a few towers will not charge the drop fee in the field. They find it easier just to, instead of getting into a conflict and having anything escalated, they will just take the car off the truck and call it a day and call it even. So that's why we say we don't anticipate any operational impacts. So that's for one side. So the towers see that, we haven't, from their point of view, it's not going to be any money lost. So that's one side. But also, staff feels that we could lower the potential of conflicts in the field, that it's better for consumer protection. But that's really what I can speak to.
If I could, Caitlin, just to add a little bit of color there, Mr. Buck, I think, like what Caitlin was saying was that we don't see this fee charged often, and when we do see the fee charged, that is when there is the highest likelihood of conflict in the field. That's when the videos on YouTube and everything get posted. And so actually what we were attempting to do, again, through your sort of psychological, socioeconomic lens there, was reduce the incentive for a tower to charge that fee and go with what we've heard from certain towers, which is, listen, charging $25 in the field is not worth it to me. It's much easier and much more lucrative for them to drop the car, move on, tow another car, and make $150. Boom, $100 or $135 right now. So that was our thinking going into recommending that change. But we'll see next week when we talk to the TTAB about how they feel. This was one that was generated through our discussions with the county manager.
All right, Commissioner Brose.
Thank you. Just to recount, the arrangement is for the towing is with the property owner and the private company, right? That's how it's worked. I guess it's not clear to me what the justification is for actually raising the fee, other than it's been a while and they can. Is there another justification sort of shown or expressed?
Right. So the justification we brought this year, the TTAB has brought to staff, is what's included. It's the towing financial justification. It's the rising costs, the maintenance fees, the towing store lot, their rental costs, and their insurance. So that's what was provided to us, and that's what the TTAB based their recommendation on.
Okay, and just as a follow-up, I have to say, having read the report, I am in support of the improvements to be made to the locations where they're picked up. They, having been towed a couple times, I will say they're intimidating to go up to those places. So, thank you.
Thank you,
Commissioner Price.
Yeah, sorry, just one other question. Like Commissioner Buck, I'm a novice. I have never had my car towed, so this is kind of new stuff for me. So the towing company contracts with a private entity to tow cars from its lot or from wherever they are that are parked illegally. Is that another source of income on top of what they get to collect in terms of the fee for the tow? I guess because the question is, if they do the drop, you mentioned that there's no cost incurred. There's of course a cost incurred if they drive from wherever they are to go pick up a car and then start putting the car on the tow and then have to drop it for no fee. So there is a cost incurred. There's time and there's the person's, I guess, hourly charge or what he does or what he charges. So I was just curious as to what. There's a contract involved with this, correct? So they're getting paid beyond the tow itself. Yes.
Each contract is different. I can't speak to each one, as I've heard that most of them don't. They don't contract a fee for the actual service, but I don't know if that's true for every single contract.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fesselberg. I think you might still be muted, Commissioner Fesselberg.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you so much, Chair Slate. Ms. Thomas, my apologies. I came in a little late to your presentation, and I was trying to work technology in terms of getting in, and I kind of came in midway as you were talking about the price increase for towing. My first question is, could you just repeat in terms of by how much the fees are increased? And secondly, it's a little it's within the realm of towing and Arlington County, but in what ways is the county actually overseeing or even regulating any sort of predatory practices when it comes to towing? Yeah, those are my two questions that I have. Thank you.
Right, so I will go over the tow fees again. So right now, our tow fees are $135 maximum, and the towers are able to charge an extra $25 for either nights, weekends, or holidays, no more than 2 fees at a time. If this goes forward, the tow fee will be raised to $150, and the additional fee will be raised to $30. So if you're towed on like a night and a weekend, right now it's $185, but if this is passed, it will be $210. And then the other fee is the drop fee that is recommended to be decreased from 25 to 10. And as far as predatory towing, the county, that's why we have you may have come in a little bit later, but we are really working on our consumer protection bucket. We're really trying to make sure our towing signage is extremely clear. We're cleaning it up so that, we want the signs to be just all we want is clarity. We want you would be able to read the sign and know exactly when towing is, so you don't accidentally park there. We're strengthening our storage facilities, lightings. We're making sure that the signage is right and the safety. We have there was a lot that needed a storage that did not have any kind of physical structure on site, and we want to make sure we're requiring now that the towers have those on site to take payment. And we're also the placards. That was actually a proposition by the police, and the towers were completely on board about putting a sticker in the window, and it's clearly to display all the fees so that everyone is completely clear and everything is up front. So we're really trying to strengthen the consumer protection aspects when it comes to predatory towing.
Caitlin, could you talk a little bit about police's action in response to complaints? Because I think that's where the commissioner was going with his question, was what are we actually doing to enforce the ordinance?
Okay. For sure. Right. So we do have a complaint process, and every complaint that is filed, we have a dedicated police officer who investigates, and I have some stats there as well. Excuse me if you'd want to hear those. But every complaint is that is entered in the system is when uninvestigated, and the police officer makes sure that the tower has complied with every single part of our county code. And if they have not, then they are found to be in violation. And then the consumer is given a letter that lets them know that they were found in violation. And in 2019, we had 2019, we had 53 complaints, and in 2020, we had 53 complaints. 2019, we had 56 complaints.
Great. Commissioner Fessy-Work, did you have more?
Yes, I just as a follow-up comment, I mean, I would really appreciate any more resources in terms of like the statistics and whatnot, just because I would like to see of those of all those complaints, how many have been like still active, how many have been closed, if what like the process in terms of for like how like the whole follow-up and whatnot. I would greatly appreciate it if you could forward that to me, Ms. Thomas. Thank you.
Oh yeah, definitely, I can do that. You're welcome.
Commissioner Buck, back to you.
Thank you. Just a quick question about the consumer protection measures. They look sufficient to sort of justify the price increase. I think anything that can be done to sort of make the experience smoother and more transparent is great. Could you talk a little bit about how either the county manager's office or your police partners go about ensuring compliance with these sort of code requirements, what the plan is there besides sort of the complaint-driven experience feedback loop that you have established with the police?
Okay, yeah, it is mainly, I would say it's mainly complaint-driven, but and as things come up, for instance, we've done a couple, like 2 years ago, we did or 2 or 3 years ago, we did an essentially, we made sure that we had complaints about this one particular lot, this parking lot, and we went out and did a full investigation and made sure that it was completely up to code with signage and everything. So it's complaint driven in a way, but we can look at it from specific incidences or also actual lots. And the police, they make sure that the signs are up to date, and they do investigate the towing lot, so they have a relationship with the towers.
Another thing, Mr. Buck, is that while it is complaint driven on a case-by-case basis, those complaints give us instant level information about where we see persistent issues occur. And that was what Caitlin was saying about if we see a pattern, then we can go out and then sort of monitor, survey, and follow up according to where the complaints are being generated. So that's kind of how the feedback loop works. But I think I take your point that a more proactive, call it enforcement or ensuring accountability there would be something to maybe to look at how we might be able to resource that.
Thank you. I'm just going to jump back in here. I feel like this is a tough situation that everybody's in here, just because this is the government setting a price, right? The market is not determining which towing company is, best at providing an efficient service because they can offer the best price for it. But this is literally the government saying this is how much everybody is going to pay to get towed, because the business is deciding who's offering the service to their customers or lack thereof. And, the only experience I have with this on Transportation Commission is the taxi cab industry. We've had similar conversations about setting, taxi cab rates in the past before Uber and Lyft completely disrupted that. And I feel like the taxi cab industry worked a lot more hand in hand with county staff on justifying those prices. There was a lot more information presented to the commission and a lot more information presented to the board to justify why, a raise in taxi cab rates was justified. And this paltry little bit of data that's here in the financial justification does not rise to that level. And that's tough because I think we want the price to be fair to both parties. Like towing is actually important service to the county. Businesses need to be able to take the parking spaces that they are, paying for in their rent to their landlord and ensure that, their customers are the ones that are putting the wear and tear on those parking spaces. But we also need to not be gouging people. So I'm feeling a little trapped here by the lack of, cooperation from the towing industry in providing an appropriate justification for this pricing. I don't know if the staff has any further response to that, or if I should jump over to the next commissioner with a question or a comment.
I think I'd agree with you, Mr. Slatt, that this puts us in a difficult position from the perspective of not having a situation where they have completely opened their books to us. I think that that's partially a factor of the relationship with towers in the Commonwealth, but it's also a factor of the state itself setting the planning district maximum rates, but then also allowing authority to the locality to set rates that are not in line with those maximums. So we're forced into this situation, as you described, where we just don't have full transparency into what their business case is. But as Caitlin mentioned, and I think I can speak from a little bit of experience, we've never had the type of productive conversations that we've had this year on TTAB. I think all of the membership agreed that the Trespass Towing Advisory Board was working collaboratively with one another. They felt like while transparency may not be perfect between the towers and citizen representative and police, it was much improved. And so we took all that into consideration on balance, especially against the consumer protection changes that we're trying to make. So I think all that went into our consideration.
Thank you. That's very helpful background. Commissioner Muradovic, you have your hand up.
Hi. Yeah. Before I get all negative, I mean, there is a lot of positive stuff here, but stating that the cooperation has never been better. I mean, it sounds like it was a pretty low bar before, and the thing that kind of makes me even more skeptical about the price increase justifications is that, if we look at pretty much every electoral cycle, these towing companies, especially advanced towing, are giving out political donations. So it doesn't seem like they're hard up for cash. And the only reason those donations, aren't taken is when a candidate actively rejects them. So, I mean, the increase very well might be justified, but I just want to reiterate that that argument could have been made a lot better by the towing companies, and I hope that they'll be providing more information.
Thank you. Commissioner
Brose.
Yeah, not exactly to pile on, but as one who's been towed and felt like it was a 5-minute violation as opposed to, and going online and noticing that my fellow residents felt that there was predatory towing going on in certain places. I can imagine that there was an ability to have some conversations this year because there are less people parking and during the pandemic and lots less towing opportunities. But again, feeling the same struggle in terms of raising prices with the lack of information that our chairman is talking about as well. So just a difficult one. Not a question, just a comment.
Yeah.
All right. I'm not seeing any hands up. Do any other commissioners have comments or questions, or would somebody like to move the county manager's recommendation to get us started on a motion or anything like that?
Did they just say it was an info item?
Yes.
No, actually, this item is an action item.
They're welcome to take action.
Okay.
You serve this advisory role. You're welcome to take action if you want, but we did bring it for your information.
Yeah, I think I've had a conversation with our board liaison that indicated some additional feedback from the commission would be welcomed. So unless the commission doesn't want to, I would be inclined to make some sort of recommendation to the board. Commissioner Fesselwerk. I think you're still muted, Commissioner Fesselwerk.
I'm so sorry. Had a long day. So I do have a question, and I just don't know if it's something that could be talked about now, but it's just I'm really curious to find out or to know if there's any sort of conversation in terms of how these new proposed changes go along with the, I guess the proposed changes with the let's say the RPP, the residential parking program. If there, I mean, Ms. Thomas or Mr. Aiken, do you all have anything to, like, any comments to say about that? Or, I mean, just out of curiosity.
I don't think that there is a connection really in any way, given the fact that what we're talking about in terms of the ordinance changes only affect private property. And I know Mr. Krim is with us if he wants to jump in here, but I don't see a nexus between the two items.
Got it. Thank you.
So, I guess, would you be open to a motion to recommend the advertising for a public hearing on the proposed amendments to the county's towing ordinance without the higher fees?
So I believe we were sent old board reports. This was already advertised for public hearings. Is that correct,
right.
Steph?
So I'm looking at the old one. Sorry. Thank you. Right. Recommend the proposed amendments without the increase in the towing fee.
I think that's enough of a motion, as outlined in the draft board report dated January 21st, 2021.
Yes.
Is there a second for that motion and among the commission?
Second.
Seconded by, I believe, that Commissioner Fessework. Is there any discussion of that motion?
And just to say, it's with respect to the actual towing fees that the 135 to 150.
All right, Commissioner Lantelmi, you've got your hand up first.
Yeah, I'm wondering if what we could do is, since none of us really have enough information about the, have enough information about the justification for the increase in fees, send it forward with the increase in fees, but recommend to the board that they be given more information from the other advisory commission and from the industry about the justification for the numbers. Because they, of course, we're only recommending, they don't have to take it. So, we could certainly give them the option of up to the amount, but that we recommend that they gather additional information. Something like that. Rather than not recommending any increase at all, because it may very well be that an increase is appropriate. We just don't have, we're not comfortable, I guess, maybe the best way to put it, that we have enough information that's justified.
All right. Thank you for that comment, Commissioner Lantelmi. Commissioner Mradovic, your hand's up next.
Yes, I'm sorry, my audio cut off and I didn't hear the motion that we are discussing.
The motion is everything that is in all of the changes recommended in our board report, except for the increase to the towing fees.
Okay, thank you.
Just double checking, Commissioner Bros, did I accurately summarize that?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Commissioner Buck, your hand's up next.
Oh, I think I had a similar suggestion to Commissioner Lantelmi, except that I'd perhaps say that I'd agree with Commissioner Bros that perhaps it's hard to endorse the higher fees without some sort of statement of need for them, and perhaps I'd offer a suggestion that we do not support the fees pending provision of cost and pricing information that would support the business need for them.
All right.
I think we're all in vociferous agreement, though, that it just seems like there is a lack of justification for the increased fees, and the critical question seems to be whether or not we support the lower amount as a recommendation or the higher amount each pending receipt of the cost info. And I'd lean towards recommending the lower amount until such time as there is adequate information.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Commissioner Price, you're up next.
Commissioner Buck hit the nail right on the head on that last comment. I would agree with Commissioner Brose. I think she's right on the mark with her recommendation and her motion. I would just add that, with the exception of the raising of the fees until such time that further details can be provided by the towing companies to justify such a request for increase.
Thank you, Commissioner Price. Commissioner Fesselberg, you're up next.
Thank you. Yeah, just to echo what all of the previous commissioners said, that I am also in line with. I don't fully feel confident in terms of just simply agreeing with the current justification. I think that there needs to be more of a follow-up in terms of what the real reason is. And going back to what Commissioner Lentelmi said in terms of giving the county board members an option to make that follow-up, I think, is it possible to urge them to actually get a real reason? Is that possible? I wanted to ask that. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Clement, you're up next.
Yeah, I would echo what Mr. Lentelme said. I think that given that we're in a situation where we don't have enough information, we can't say yay or nay, but we should include a recommendation to the county board to not make a determination until it gets more information.
Thank you. Mr. Aiken, I see you have your hand up. I'm sorry. Feel free to jump in with staff's comments.
No, that's okay. I was trying to, make sure I was acting on courtesy there. But in the interest of staff's clarification, could I ask that if the commission were able to articulate the types or examples of data or details or more additional information that it would be seeking to assist us in how we may pose this to the towing operators or in our own recommendations to the county board or otherwise. I think, I guess what I'm asking for is just some guidance at what we have asked this this question ourselves, but it may help strengthen our ask if you were to provide a little more clarity around that. And if not, then that's fine. I just offer that as something that may help us.
Thank you. That's super useful. It's always great to hear from staff on what the commission can do to help provide backup to actually get this stuff done. I just wanted to say, based on the motion, I feel wholeheartedly, like I think other commissioners have, that this increase may very well be justified, but that the towing industry needs to meet us halfway and actually provide more information to justify that. I am not comfortable going to my neighbors and saying, that I recommended that the board increase these fees based on the information that has been presented so far. So I would say what I would like to see is the same pieces of information from more than one company. Right now, this feels like very cherry picked, like there's the opportunity that one company, saw an increase in this one area and this other company saw an increase in this other area, and they just picked the portions of their business with the largest increases and sent those to justify. So, I find what they're paying in rent or whatever. Definitely that's a huge cost in Arlington County. I would love to see that information for multiple companies. And then I would love to see these expenses put in the context of their either revenue or some other sort of sense of how much business they are doing. Because like I said, if you see something like an insurance cost doubling, to me, that says it's not just their risk has doubled, it's that they're doing more business. And so the risk comes with that. Did their insurance rate double because they doubled the number of trucks that they have out there doing tows? That's not the kind of cost increase that I think needs to be reflected in the price. So those are the sorts of things that I would like to see. If other commissioners would like to weigh in on that, I would be happy to give folks a chance to talk. And then as far as like what this motion should look like, I'm of the opinion there is always a certain amount of momentum behind whatever the recommendation moving forward at RTA was, and that if we think the board really needs to take a step back and say, hold on, is this the right way to go? That it's important that we basically recommend something else, that we recommend not approval, or that we recommend not increasing the price. The board is welcome to do it, but I think that sends a message that gets the board attention that, hey, this is something that we think bears a lot of additional scrutiny. Because you've all been on the commission long enough, for the most part, we and staff are on the same page with stuff. So I think it gets board attention, and that board attention is deserved on this item. And if others have thoughts, I'd love to hear them. Commissioner Buck.
Yeah, I think you started down the road there, Mr. Chair, of some good criteria that we could ask for in terms of supporting the price request. Again, and without necessarily requiring them to sort of open up their entire financials to the general public, which is not something we want to do. I think, certainly real estate is a factor. The number of operating trucks and perhaps the number of operating employees are good yardsticks, and simply the number of transactions that they have done in Arlington County on these private concession contracts, I would think would be sufficient to establish the trend of their business without necessarily requiring them to open the kimono to the entire county.
Thank you. Excellent point, Commissioner Buck. I agree. Commissioner Lantelme, your hand's up next.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Buck on this. And I would say that I don't have a problem with the information being anonymized so that we don't know what particular companies are, that it could be all mixed together, take averages. I have no problem with that. I also wonder whether COVID has an impact on this. Presumably there's less towing going on over the past year because fewer people are driving, more deliveries are being made. So that it might be they want the increase because their volume has actually decreased and they're covering the same fixed costs with way fewer transactions. Is that part of it also? And that's something I think that's a question that should be asked. Is there a way to evaluate that? Thank you.
Any other commissioner comments on this motion that is before us, which is to recommend that the board approve all of the changes in the towing ordinance except the increase in the tow fee? All right, hearing.
Is that second?
It was already seconded. Commissioner Fesselwerk seconded early on, but thank you, Commissioner Clement. All right, hearing no further discussion or motions to amend, we'll go to a vote. So let's start with Commissioner Clement.
Yes.
Commissioner Brose.
Yes.
Commissioner Price.
Aye.
Commissioner Bruno.
Yes.
Commissioner Lantelme.
Yes.
I also vote yes. Commissioner Buck.
Yes.
Commissioner Moradovic.
Yes.
Commissioner Yeri.
Yes.
Commissioner Fesselwerk.
Wholeheartedly yes.
Did I miss any commissioners in the participant list? Nope. All right, then that motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Aiken. It's great to have you at the commission. I think that may be a first or a second, and we are ready to move on to the next item.
And our next item is item number 3. This is the residential permit parking policy. And Stephen Krim is here to give you an overview from DES transportation staff. So Stephen, are you ready?
I'm having audio issues with my primary method, so I'll go to the backup. Sorry about that. Thank you all for taking additional time with us on this issue. We are here to give you a brief discussion of, or brief presentation of proposed changes to the residential permit parking program. And we are looking for your recommendation that the board adopt the county manager's recommendation for changes to the program at its February meeting. I will be brief in my discussion of the proposed program and how it compares to the current program, though I will also highlight the changes that we've made to our proposal since the December advertisement, and you'll see obviously description of these changes in the draft board report that we submitted to you. First, the proposed program expands eligibility for the program to all households built by right. This is the eligibility to petition and join the program, but it continues to exclude households that live in homes built by special exception. The proposed program would alter the maximum number of permits that a household can receive. We have altered slightly our original proposal to the board from 2 permits for properties that have off-street parking of any amount and 3 to 2 and 4. So to be clear, what our first option here is that it would be a maximum of 2 annual permits for any household that has off-street parking, or 4 permits, as is the situation today, for households with no parking in a driveway, garage, or so on. Given the board's recommendation or amendment and guidance at the February hearing, we're also including the option of keeping the maximum number of annual permits per household at 4. The section on visitors and others has received lots of attention. There has been no change since the proposal that was advertised. However, I will briefly go over the fact that we would maintain the same types of passes for residents to give to their visitors, the short-term visitor book and flex pass. Landlords would continue to be able to obtain 1 per property. And we would introduce 2-hour paid parking or short-term parking for people with permits and passes on all RPP streets. We would formalize our good in all zones temporary contractor permit and temporary contractor permit processes. We would introduce a limited number of permits for school staff at schools that have RPP restrictions on the streets surrounding it. And we would allow up to 1 permit for each employee of a group home located in an RPP zone. The proposed program would remove subsidy for the program from the general taxes and recover all program costs with fees. We have made some modifications, though, to our fee proposals here. In the option where we go to 2 and 4 permits, we obviously need to introduce a price for that 4th permit. And we have set that at $150, which is at the high end of the similar number of permit or the other jurisdictions in the region that matches what they charge for basically the 4th or higher permit per household. For the scenario in which all households would continue to be eligible for up to 4 annual permits, we've also made some modifications from what the board originally seemed to have envisioned in the amendment at the December hearing. Whereas in that hearing, the amendment conceived of differential pricing for households with and without off-street parking. We have actually made the proposal that the pricing would be the same for all households. We made this modification because while charging households with off-street parking more than those that don't have off-street parking is logical, in practice, in our view, the demand management benefit of charging households with off-street parking a few dollars more for an annual pass does not justify the resources needed to maintain data on who does and does not have off-street parking and the extra customer service that we need to provide to explain that difference in prices. So in other words, again, it would be up to 4 in this option for all households, and all households would have the same pricing. you'll see that the first 3 annual permits are lower than what was advertised and what you would see in the 2 and 4 option. Though the fourth permit price is the same at $150. We have then also lowered in kind the price for the Goodnall Zone permit, price for school staff and group home staff, and the price for the contractor permit, which is basically set at a prorated amount of 3 months based on the first residential permit. Something that's remained the same is the 50% discount for households that qualify for certain, or that are low income and can demonstrate that by their qualification for certain state and federal assistance programs. We also added a program to our list of eligible programs for, we added this program from the Veterans Administration that is a pension program for low-income veterans at the recommendation of a member of the Housing Commission back in December. In terms of some of the other items that we've described before, we are proposing to remove the out-of-area test for the RPP petition process and raise the occupancy threshold from 75% to 85%, while raising the petition threshold from 60% to 80% of households. In other words, 80% of households need to approve of restrictions in order to. We would also add a condition where the permits and passes from 2 zones would be valid on street where zones meet, the boundaries of zones meet, and we would limit customization of restrictions to each zone to only the hours of enforcement. We would grandfather existing restrictions, though all would have the 2-hour paid parking and the zones where 2 different, with the stickers and decals and permits and passes from the 2 different zones would be valid. One change that we have made is we have simplified the process for splitting existing zones. Beforehand, the process of, or as it is now, the process for splitting zones that are seen as too large is a multi-step process that involves actually 2 petitions and an occupancy test, which we have heard from some residents is part of the reason why we've never actually had a successful zone split since 2005. So we have made that a simpler process so that residents have a better chance of actually eliminating the cross-commuting problem that we have heard can be an issue in zones that are large. So to conclude again, our request is that you vote to advise the board to approve the manager's recommended changes at the RPP program at the February hearing. And we look forward to any public comment, your questions. And I'm happy, of course, to go into more detail. I realize that this is very short, and I'm, of course, happy to share much more information as you need it. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And just to double check, Mr. Best, there are no speakers on this item?
We have no speakers on this item. We did receive one letter from the Boston, Virginia Square Civic Association, and that was disseminated this afternoon.
Yep, I got that. Great. Thank you very much. And then I just wanted to double check with Mr. Krim real quick before we jump into discussion. The county manager's recommendation remains what is labeled option A throughout our board report. Is that correct?
Yeah, I understand that that's perhaps a little confusing. The reason why we've left both options in there is because while we do think that the 2 and 4 is, our preferred option, we want to be clear on how the board to, if they keep it at 4. So we wanted to be clear that our position is if you make it 4 for everybody, we would not recommend differential pricing.
Right, great. I just wanted to it was unclear initially reading the board report if the manager was recommending one or the other. So I just wanted to be clear that in fact there is a manager recommendation for A, and B is in there to help guide the board if they wanted to go that direction and how to implement it. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Great, awesome. Commissioner questions or comments, though I know we went into a lot of this at the work session. Commissioner Buck.
Hi, I'm the commissioner who skipped the work session, so I may be covering old ground, and I apologize. I am a am really I am really wedded to the notion of paying less if you do not have existing off-street parking. Off-street parking typically reduces public parking capacity, and I understand your sort of your data management acquisition challenge with trying to police exactly who has off-street parking and who doesn't in charging fees. My question is, with the 2 and 4 proposal, then how do we establish the proper eligibility for that 3rd and 4th permit if we don't have an inventory of whether or not a given property has off-street parking?
Yeah, no, good question. So we are actually in the process of quality controlling our data on residences and whether or not they have parking in the county. You may recall from some of our earlier presentations, we had data on the amount of off-street parking available at residences across the county. So that means that we had a data set to begin with. But of course, if we've already started the process, not knowing how the board will go, of making some double checking, triple checking that we actually have that right, so that we're ready to go if they decide to go in that direction. I would say that the cost I'm talking about, we're already incurring some of it because we want to be able to deliver the program. But of course, there's going to be the ongoing, like, are we keeping on top of it? Also, there's going to be the ongoing cost of residents. We certainly know that we're going to have to deal and serve customers who say, well, yes, I have that driveway, but I feel that shouldn't count against, the amount of permits I can get. So that's going to be additional staff time that's going to have to be spent. If people say, no, your data is incorrect, or we've done building and, the satellite imagery and the real estate assessment data, it's not accurate. We will have to go out and maintain it. So I would say it's not the initial cost of acquisition that we're talking about. It's more the ongoing maintenance of that data and just dealing with the more complex customer service.
And I also wanted to kind of reiterate from the board report, Mr. Krim, you're also saying that staff thinks it's worth maintaining that data if it's going to hard limit the number of permits that people with off-street parking are going to get, but not necessarily worth that cost to maintain that data if it's just going to determine the pricing of those permits?
Correct. I mean, theoretically, obviously, price can be something that influences behavior. That's also a way of managing something aside from just hard caps. But realistically, we're probably talking about a variation. If we're still generally trying to not produce a lot of excess revenue, we're talking about maybe $20 a year. And so the demand management power of that, and certainly the revenue difference there, I don't think really justifies that extra effort. I think putting a limit of 2 permits for households with off-street parking, I think that is certainly a much stronger form of demand management. So there, I'm saying, yes, we will make that investment in time and energy.
All right, Commissioner Clement, your hand's up next.
Yes, this one is strictly a technical question, and it has to do with enforcement. And enforcement has been raised continuously by people as being the vulnerability of this project. So right now, how is metered, or how is Parkmobile parking monitored? Do they deliver? Do you have a contract with Parkmobile for them to deliver you people who have exceeded their limit, and then you go out and ticket those people? How do you currently enforce Parkmobile parking?
Sure. Yeah. So I will say I don't. It's possible that somebody from Special Operations would be able to answer this with a little more detail, but the enforcement officers that patrol for parking in general, they are first, when they go down a block, if they see a meter that is indicating that it's not been paid, or there's no ticket in the dash, they first stop for that. and then they are able to check against a refreshed or a real-time updated list of people who have paid by Park Mobile. To my knowledge, they do not get like alarms that somebody has overstayed, but it is through access that police or public safety aides have to data from Park Mobile.
Okay, so then the question has been raised that commuter parking in RPP zones is going to be unenforceable, not because your officers don't have the technology to look at people who've exceeded their limits, but rather they basically don't have the feet on the ground to do it because they have a much larger geographic area to patrol. And so that really bothers residents of those zones. Another thing that the residents want, I mean, they're willing to compromise what they want. They want the ability to monitor the parking, the Park Mobile application. Can they get that? In other words, they want to be able to call in violations.
Yes, I understand. I have committed to looking into whether that's even possible. I do not have an answer for that yet. To my knowledge, that is not done using Park Mobile in any other cities. But it's on my to-do list to check to whether that's even possible.
And then there's a third question, and I'll let it go. And that is, it was raised at the work session that a really great compromise would be dynamic pricing. In other words, instead of setting a fixed price for commuter parking, you would have dynamic pricing, and that would limit the amount of excess parking in an RPP zone. And one of the planning commissioners, I think his name was Mr. Weir, was really concerned because he said, I know the technology is there. How come we don't have it? And I think he was told by you that it's because that was out of the scope of your assignment, or you didn't have the time or money to do it.
So first of all, right. So first of all, I would say that again, this is not meant to be commuter parking. So I understand if residents don't trust the enforcement. I get that. I just want to be clear, though, that the intent is that this is short-term parking. In terms of dynamic pricing for a system like this, I would say that that is certainly something that could be done in a situation like this. But, the county is only just now embarking on dynamic pricing for our metered spaces throughout the county. And it is an expensive proposition to get data that we think is, justifiable for changing prices. So at this point, we are not ready to propose something as complicated as dynamic pricing for the RPP program.
All right, Commissioner Price, I think your hand is up next.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Krim, let me first start by saying congratulations. I just want to say this is a yeoman's work putting this together. I've known you for years. This is just, I'm having nightmares. I'm reading this so many times, I'm having nightmares about thinking about parking. And thank you for doing that, because it really makes me try to step up my game and try to understand some of it's so complicated that I'm really having difficulty understanding. So I'm having nightmares. So I just want to say congratulations. You've done yeoman's work on this job. I agree with Audrey and Commissioner Clement to the extent that I think parking enforcement in this county is lax. I'm guilty of it myself. I think we need to step up more enforcing what we have, enforcing parking restrictions in all neighborhoods, including metered. I'll say that. Now, one of the justifications, or some of the justification for revising this program, not only was it, it's dated, the justification was that there are communities that are being left out, that they couldn't get they've been requesting RPP, but they were just the criteria was such that they couldn't get this, and that the idea about revising this program is to allow more of those communities to participate in this program. But yet, all we hear about is everybody who hates this program, some way, shape, or form. Where are those communities right now? Who's asking for this? Who wants to see this happen? We haven't heard I haven't received one email from anybody saying this is something we want. Have you? Are they out there? Are we just not hearing it? Please, can you respond to that?
Well, so I will say that, a background item to all of this is that I think if you consult our household survey comments, you'll see a wide variety of people who've said that they, either support elements of this program or they want to get RPP. I think one of the problems is that, there's kind of a mismatch in the energy level between those who, I mean, naturally, if you already have something that you think is working well for you, then it's very easy to come out and support the status quo. I think since so many of the people who don't currently have restrictions don't even want them, that means the group of people who aren't part of the program or have different views but don't have RPP, there's just fewer of them. There's fewer of them around. As one of my presentations earlier had said, those who have RPP want it, those that have RPP want to keep it, those who don't have it don't want it. I will say that during our question and answer session, we did have a civic association president who had said that she thought that we have done a good job of trying to compromise between different viewpoints. And I've received, private emails from people saying, oh, I think you're doing the right thing. But you're right. We have not heard a lot of praise in the form of emails and comments at these commission meetings. But we've heard none, really, probably. But I will say, though, there are some letters that have come in that have said, I do not support this part of the program. I am fine with everything else.
I just want some positivity out of this, something to help me get to yes. That's what I'm really looking for.
I would ask you to maybe think about the elements that are and are not getting support. I certainly understand that there is very strong opposition to the 2-hour parking. There is very strong opposition to changing the permit caps and lowering those. But we have received positive feedback from commissioners themselves and others in the community about, the eligibility should be expanded to more types of housing. And we also have received positive feedback that, obviously I don't want to pay more for something, but you're probably right. I should probably pay more for this. So
I hear from everybody on this call, on these meetings all the time. I want to hear from some other people other than these lovely folks I participate in these meetings on a monthly basis. So thank you, Mr. Krim. Yeoman's work. Congratulations, though.
All right, Commissioner Brose, you're up next.
Thank you. I like my colleague, Commissioner Price, have spent some time trying to get my brain around this. And that's as a participant in the RPP, to be honest, and a happy one. And like you just mentioned, happy to pay a little bit more money for it. I guess my question is, because I've heard so much of the discussion at the other meetings is around, the 2-hour paid parking. And I know you guys have created this mathematical model, sort of looked at the revenues and expenses. Curious if the 2-hour paid parking component of that is that a major part of it? Is that a minor part of it? Is there some way that we can look at it? I'm looking for a little whether or not that's a critical part of this, given the attention, as we all know, has been paid to it.
So in terms of the revenue or fiscal balance or fee balance here, that is the paid parking or paid short-term parking is not part of our revenue model. That's for two reasons. One, We don't have much experience in the county with the short-term parking in these districts. We have no experience with it for paid parking, or we will only have experience of it being like just short-term 2-hour parking that's free. The second reason is that there are not many streets, so we don't have a large data set to pull this from. But when we compare streets that have RPP and 2-hour parking with the streets that don't have the 2-hour parking nearby, it's like a few percentage points difference in occupancy. So we felt that for the purposes of modeling revenue, we would focus only on the fees. Of course, as we've stated all through this process, if this were to, if the board were to accept 2-hour paid parking, if that were to be instituted, and it somehow became a large source of revenue, we could look at that as something to offset the cost of the permit fees. So that's part of the reason why we're saying, it's not meant to be a one and done for the next 15 years as it was in 2005. But no, it has not been included in our revenue calculations for this purpose.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Buck, back to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Commissioner Price's effusive praise of the work you've done. I think anybody who's ever touched parking from your side of the screen is getting anxiety attacks at just the mere notion of tackling this. I guess I just want to speak in support of the one positive I have heard throughout, I think both from this commission and maybe just through a lack of strident opposition, is the notion that this program has got to be self-supporting. I mean, that just, I have not heard, and I've heard complaints about some of the things that you have highlighted, but just the mere notion that to pursue for any sort of equity, at a bare minimum, this has got to be covering its costs. And I strongly support that notion. I'm struggling with the cap on the number of permits, probably because that's probably the one where I've heard firsthand the most comments. But I feel like, to your point about the strident opposition not being counterbalanced by people in favor, I think there's a large majority of folks in saturated RPP blocks who, perhaps don't know or just aren't willing to rat out their neighbors to say, you know what, 4 or 5 cars parked on the same block is straining the capacity for everybody else. And perhaps there is just an issue of fairness and equity that we need to step in with policy to address. And finally, about the 2-hour parking, I know that's the one where I'm most uncomfortable too, simply because we just, we don't know what the enforcement issues are. We don't know what the compliance is going to be. And I think my personal fear is that we institute a new paid program and we don't immediately sort of inculcate users with a culture of compliance. But I look at the occupancy data that you've gathered, and it just seems like for 99% of the RPP blocks, this is just, I just don't think this is going to break the back of the entire system. I'm in an RPP block, and while I acknowledge it's probably one of the lowest occupancy RPP blocks around, it's frankly, we need more parked cars on our block for traffic calming purposes. So I don't know if any of that resonates with Commissioner Price or anybody else, but that's kind of where I'm lying with regards to the whole thing.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Commissioner Lantelmi.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've continued to do a lot of thinking about this, and the working session did help. Thank you, Mr. Krim. You definitely answered a number of questions that during that session, like, for example, I am now comfortable with the county's little parking thing, not the parkmobile, the other way of doing it. I realize it's not going to be an issue because somebody has to walk back to their car every 2 hours. It's a practical matter. Yet it will happen, but it won't happen enough to be able to drive the park. So that I off the table for me as far as I'm concerned. I really see this as being two separate issues. One is the changes to the residential parking program. I think that those changes make a lot of sense. I think they're worth going forward with. I personally am going to be favoring the option B, keeping the 4 per household. I'm convinced also that you're correct that administratively trying to deal with things differently for the different types of properties, whatever, it just isn't practical, or it doesn't make economic sense. I will absolutely go along with that. Even though ideally I'd like to have things be more fine-grained, it just isn't worth the overhead to be able to do it. And simplifying the program has its values. The other program, of course, is the paid parking. That's something I don't feel comfortable with. And I don't know if everybody's read the letter that came today from the Ballston Virginia Square Civic Association, but they really summarized, not summarized, they actually got into quite a good length a number of the concerns I had. Like Commissioner Buck, my neighborhood is residential parking also, and my street is way underparked. We have plenty of spaces here. It's not an issue on both sides of my street. However, I have gone around to some other areas and have checked it out in the middle of the day when it's in effect. And for example, Virginia Square and Ballston between Fairfax and Washington Boulevard, that is very, very densely parked. In the middle of the day with residential parking, there are many blocks that have no spaces whatsoever available. Others have at most 1 or 2. It's very, very densely parked. Whereas crossing Washington Boulevard, going a couple blocks north, you have crickets. It's like only a handful of cars maybe on a block. It is, and that came back to my point, which I was raising at earlier meetings, is that all of these zones are not one size fits all. We have 14, 15 RPP zones now, and even more when you subdivide them. The A, B's, and C's. Block to block can be radically different. And I just don't, and I think the people in these areas who are complaining are the ones who have very few spaces, even with the residential parking program. To add paid parking on top of that will essentially make it completely full, which is why you want to have dynamic pricing. If it was dynamic pricing, you'd have the ideal of 85% parked, 15% vacancies. That has all sorts of great effects. It reduces driving around time. It discourages people from driving it doesn't make it cost effective to drive. It makes it better to walk or to take transit. There's all sorts of good things that come from dynamic pricing. And we're just beginning to get into that because our pilot program hasn't even started yet. I am attracted to the idea of paid parking. I think it's a good idea ultimately, but we're not ready for it right yet. And because we cannot do a one-size-fits-all, the same parking fees for every single zone across the entire county, where there's such radical differences from even within zones, not to mention from zone to zone to zone. I'd like to get us to have experience with the dynamic parking, dynamic pricing. I think that actually could be the answer to this. That would absolutely permit us to go ahead and do this. But until we get that up and running, get experience with it, and know how it works, I think it's premature for us to have the paid parking in at this time. That's pretty much my rant on this right now, but that's the way I'm probably going to be voting should we have a motion tonight. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Lantelmi. I did actually want to get a question in here with Mr. Krim. There's the statement that's been in the staff report ongoing here for a couple months, and I bumped on it every time I read it, so I just wanted to get some detail. It says, some residents believe that it would be better to make the number of permits unlimited, but make the cost of permits much higher so that residents would be encouraged to park on their property. However, residents in the RPP program preferred managing parking by reducing the number of permits available over increasing pricing. Can you talk about what feedback you've got over the course of this that backs up that statement that people in RPP would prefer to hard limit the number of permits rather than increase prices?
Sure. So that primarily came from the survey that we did of households in the spring of 2019. So that invitations went out to every household in the RPP program because of our sampling. We got about 4,500 responses. When we look at the responses there, we had this question for people who already have RPP. If parking space availability became a problem on your street, which of the following measures would you most support to manage parking demand? So one of the choices was lower the maximum number of permits, but keep the cost the same. That was selected by 29% of respondents. The next highest was lower the max number of permits and increase the cost at 20%. And then do not change the max number of permits per household, but increase the cost was at 19%. So, it was a meaningful preference there over simply using price to manage the parking demand.
Thank you. All right, Commissioner Clement, you're up next.
Yes, I want to associate myself with Mr. Lentelme's comments. I think he has summarized my position as well as his own. I also do want to thank Mr. Krim because I know he has done a tremendous amount of research. So it's not and performance. It's not a reflection on his job. He basically had an impossible job to do it, and he did it as well as he could possibly have done. However, I believe what Mr. Jim Lentelme has said, that the only way to equitably administer paid parking is through dynamic pricing, and we don't have it, so it's premature. So whereas I could go along with most of the other elements of this proposal, that one I can't. I also want to thank Mr. Krim for pointing out where there has been a consensus, and it is rather remarkable that people are willing to pay extra for the program. I like that. I think we should go with that. But on the other hand, because we are going to be socking these people with essentially double their current pricing, we should tread lightly on the paid parking issue. And I also want to point out that dynamic pricing would not only address the issue of the diversity of neighborhoods in the county, but it also addresses the diversity of situations. Like people are saying, well, we do something during pandemic and then we find that it doesn't work after the pandemic is over. Well, dynamic pricing will deal with that because it deals with supply and demand every single day. And so I want to get back to Mr. Krim. He said basically people do support doubling the fees. They are not wild about 2-hour parking. They are, and there is a broad consensus on expanded residential parking, which will bring in fee. That will obviously increase fees as well, but that again will affect the availability of 2-hour parking. So all of these things, I think my concern is this. There are elements of this program that all of us support, and there are a few elements that most of us don't. But as far as I know, we can't sever one from the other. This is going to be an up or down vote. Am I right or wrong about that?
We can make a motion however we want. And
Okay.
So if I were a betting man and making predictions, I would predict that the end of this item will be us recommending the approval of the vast majority of the RPP program and either recommending deferral of implementation of some other pieces or that they be taken off the table in lieu of further study. That would be my guess is where we would end up here.
Well, I like the language that you're proposing, so please keep it in mind.
Awesome. With that said, I did want to jump in here. I think I'm largely aligned with Commissioner Lantelmi. I think there is a ton of really great stuff in this RPP update. I think it is critical that we expand the eligibility for the program. I think it is patently unfair right now who can get RPP and who can't. I think it is incredibly important that we get this program to where it pays for itself. I think it is patently unfair that it is being implemented on the back of the general taxpayer and not just those who are eligible for RPP. I think there are a number of important administrative updates here as far as making it easier for staff to actually do the occupancy studies when people want a new RPP block and all of that sort of stuff. My basically one concern at this point is the paid parking. Not because I disagree with the notion of paid parking in RPP zones. I think, what's the word I'm looking for? On a theoretical level, I am completely on board, but I just have not seen the information from the county that would lead me to the confidence that they are prepared to proactively enforce paid parking in RPP. And just the way it's structured, the way it works, complaint-based parking is not going to work anymore. Your average citizen is not going to know whether a car is able to be parked there or not because they don't have access to Park Mobile information about who's paid and who hasn't. Additionally, I kind of fall into the this can't be a one-size-fits-all solution. As Mr. Krim has stated in the past, there's a very small percentage of our RPP blocks that actually don't allow, parking in the evening, that are actually RPP restricted in the evening. And I think that's kind of one indication that we should be paying attention to, that some of these blocks are different than other blocks. These blocks, it's really important that RPP be enforced during the dinner hour, and when in most RPP blocks, nobody cares. I'm definitely falling in the deferral of implementation of paid parking camp at this point. What I would love to hear from other commissioners about, because I have not heard consensus as people talk, is where people are falling on the option A versus option B. Should we hard cap the number of permits, and should it be based on whether you have off-street parking available to you? Or should we be allowing anyone to get up to 4 permits, but ostensibly relying on price to kind of prevent people from going to all the way to the max? Why pay $150 a year if you could just park your 4th vehicle in your driveway or whatever? So would love to hear more from people how they're falling on that. Commissioner Lantelmi, do you have a new thing, or is your hand still up from earlier? I'm going to go with hand still up from earlier and bounce back. Oh, actually go to Commissioner Yeri, who we haven't heard from yet today.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was on mute. Sorry, Commissioner Slack. I'm still here. I'll reiterate, I am in favor of option B, since you're asking. That's the one I would be going with. One thing I did want to mention, though, in order to help build neighborhood consensus in favor of paid parking, because right now I'm getting a lot from the neighborhoods, how's this going to benefit us? There are other jurisdictions that essentially create the equivalent of a neighborhood BID, business improvement district. It's a residential improvement district, that the monies raised from park goes to neighborhood improvements. And of course, we have a neighborhood program. We have the neighborhood conservation program, which is very much underfunded. It's years and years behind in getting the projects funded that are in the queue right now. Why couldn't we explore merging these two ideas? Had the neighborhood parking, paid parking, go toward neighborhood conservation projects? That gives neighborhoods an incentive to have paid parking in their neighborhoods. I'm throwing out there as an idea because I don't think it's ever been raised anywhere, and I think it's other jurisdictions do it. It's in the academic literature as a positive way to do this to do paid parking. And anyway, I'm throwing that out as an idea. Thank you. I'll pass now.
Mr. Krim, has county staff considered the sort of parking benefit district notion as part of RPP or as part of anything else? Can you speak to that at all?
It's something that we've had as, discussions, but not all the way up to proposing, something very formally and internally. I think there's a few things that give me a little bit of pause about the idea. There's a lot of potential advantages, but something, and Mr. Lentelme already enumerated what those are. I'll just share some of the things that give me pause about it. First of all, in the county, we don't know how much revenue we're talking about. So, there could be a fair amount of infrastructure to set up for this, simply explaining it to the public and, divvying out the money for then what is not very much money in the end. Also, in general, the county prefers to keep its revenue, in a general fund that can be flexed and used for different things. I mean, as you know, the state of Virginia doesn't even have a separate millage for schools, which is very common in the United States. I think there are some questions about how to distribute those funds in an equitable way, because if residents say, well, what if the attempt is to satisfy those who think that they don't see a benefit from it, then how do we distribute those funds though, so that it's not just those that have RPP, or is it fair if only those that have RPP benefit from that increased funding? Like, would we restrain those funds only to those neighborhoods with RPP, or would it be open to the entire neighborhood conservation program? And then one last thing that I think is a real big picture question to think about is, then do we set up something where residents who live in areas with metered parking, what is then the response to their argument? It'd be like, well, then that should pay for my neighborhood. I mean, we use meter revenue in the general fund, and while I will, until I leave this job, say that meter revenue is about demand management, not raising money, it is a lot of money that is used in our budget. And so if we're going to earmark funding from one type of funding in one type of or in some types of neighborhoods, but not earmark parking in other types of neighborhoods, I think we run into some real equity considerations there as well.
Thank you, Mr. Krim. That's super helpful. Let's jump to Commissioner Yeri, who we haven't heard from yet.
Yeah, I would like to throw my hat in the ring for option A. When I'm thinking about the pricing of that fourth permit, it feels so totally marginal to the cost of what I suspect the average fourth car in Arlington County is in some of these RPP zones, that I'm not really sure it would actually do anything to tamp down on demand for that third and fourth permit. And it also piggybacks, I know I'm probably going to end up being in the minority here, but it also piggybacks off the idea that I am really uncomfortable with the idea that we still reserve all this public street space for an increasingly smaller and smaller percentage of the people who live here. Like, I'm not eligible for an RPP spot in my building, and my friends can't park in RPP zones when they want to come visit whenever that day comes again. And I think I could be comfortable with deferral, but I also am worried that it will kind of become a Lucy in the football situation. Like, no matter what is proposed or how good we can get or think we can get with demand-based pricing and enforcement, there's always going to be a large group of folks out there who are going to get very loud and very upset every time we propose opening up RPP zones for 2-hour parking.
Thank you, Commissioner Yeri. Commissioner Buck, back to you.
I will join Commissioner Yeri on his small island in support of the broad outlines of option A. I agree. I do not think sort of a marginal price for that fourth permit. To Mr. Krim's point on another pricing point about the insensitivity of price, I just don't see it happening. I don't think it's going to manage curbside demand for residents. I also think there's a value of building up and refining that database of who has off-street parking and who doesn't, so that, in 15 years when Mr. Krim has trained his successor, hopefully to come before this board again, maybe we are talking about some differential pricing at all levels for folks who have off-street versus don't. Regarding the 2-hour parking, I do not associate myself with the goal of getting to dynamic pricing for RPP blocks. Dynamic pricing requires a lot of technology. It requires a lot of data. We're only just getting there with commercial paid parking, and that's going to be difficult. It is data intensive. It is difficult. It's a wonderful ideal, we're never going to get there with RPP. We just won't. At most, I think we may get to differential zone parking someday, and that only comes with actual data on who is willing to pay to park in an RPP block for how long and where that's happening. We only get that data beginning to charge for parks. So we may defer. I may be in the minority on this, but if we don't begin charging for parking, we're not going to get to a point where we have a better paid parking system that's more equitable for everybody who wants to use that finite public space. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Commissioner Lantelmi, do you have another thing, or is your hand still up from earlier?
My hand's still up from earlier. Taking it down.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Price, then.
I too also I want to associate myself with Commissioner Buck's comments. I too am in the option A category for this. And just a quick comment that, again, this whole parking thing is just, turned into a nightmare. I'm now researching Transportation Research Board studies on dynamic parking. So it's been, for a week, it's just been a whole lot of fun reading. And from what I know is that most of it is relegated to the urban core. And this just doesn't seem to elevate to the level of an urban core. And while I'm not going to rule it out, if I heard Mr. Krim correctly on our call the other day with Planning Commission, is that there's going to be an opportunity to revise this program. It's not going to go another, whatever it was, decade or more without having another review of it. And not to say that we can't implement it at some future point, but I think right now, as he has said, I don't think it's ready for what we need. I'm in the camp of we should charge for parking right now, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. This has, I think, been a really great discussion. I definitely came into this meeting thinking I knew how I felt, and the impassioned conversation with my fellow commissioners is definitely bringing me around on certain things. I did just want to share a little bit of math that's put me at least partially more at ease with the notion of paid parking in our RPP zones. The price I believe that is proposed is $1.75 an hour. If one multiplies that times an 8-hour workday, assuming one were to try commuter parking in RPP at those prices, and then multiplies that by 20 days that one might be working in a month, that comes out to $280, which, I don't know, it's been probably 6 or 8 years since I tried buying a monthly parking pass in Arlington County in Clarendon in the urban core. But I got a monthly parking pass for way less than $280 at least back then. I think we're talking more like $150 or $200 in a typical building around Arlington. I wish I knew that with a little more reliability. So while I am concerned a little bit about commuter parking, I think at this point my main concern is about enforcement and not about meter feeding and that sort of thing through Park Mobile, because I'm just not sure the economics are there to make it worth anybody's time. Commissioner Lantelmi, go ahead.
Yes, Commissioner Slide, you're absolutely right. I think that economically it's the same as garages, and the garages have lots of space, so that's not an issue. Enforcement is. It's the cheaters. It's the people who know that they're going to get charged in the garage. You can't get around that. But if you park on a side street and you only get one ticket a month, you're probably ahead of the game. It all depends on the enforcement. And as we know with Park Mobile, we cannot know whether somebody's paid or not paid. And again, I keep coming back to the Baltimore Virginia Square neighborhood, where they are already fully parked. They have a legitimate complaint that they won't be able to park in the middle of the day, even if somebody occasionally comes. And I'm not talking about commuters. Somebody who goes there and they park and they pay and they're completely legal, that will fill up those blocks that are already very, very highly parked, which is why the concern I have isn't so much with paid parking, which I do support the idea of it. Even if it's not dynamic, I think we could go with it. It's the fact that we are doing it one size fits all for every block in every zone, that you either have full paid parking through the entire zone or no paid parking in the entire zone. There's no block by block breaking it up. And I think we could do that. The data could be gathered in order to do it on a block by block basis. Thank you.
Commissioner Buck, back to you.
Sorry, I thought there was somebody ahead of me. A question for Mr. Krim. Do you feel that in this proposal, staff has the authority and latitude and a plan for if you have a block that you get persistent immediate complaints about oversaturation and capacity, do you have the latitude or the willingness to remove paid parking allowance after implementation? You're on mute.
How about now?
You're good. You're good.
Okay, thank you. So the way it is written in the proposed ordinance, it is not something where we would, it is you have it or you don't. So it is not something that the ordinance is written, the ordinance is not written in such a way that it would be an administrative change. But I think the problem that we come to then, though, is still the complexity of then instituting and justifying or not justifying that paid parking should be there. First of all, there's, we can certainly get complaints, but we would want to be verifying that there's actually a problem that is defined in some way with the parking occupancy on that street. So I think some of the things that we've talked about in terms of the complexity of dynamic parking, dynamic pricing, we come right back to those issues if the pricing is flat, but we still go to a system where some blocks have it, some blocks don't. And then you could have, say, a block decides, oh, we don't want it. And then we're like, yes, that meets some sort of criterion. But then, well, then that means that any remaining streets nearby that still have the paid parking, their concern will then become, well, no, because then all that demand is going to come over here. So we get into the same level of complexity, even if we aren't using dynamic pricing.
Commissioner Clement, you're up next. Commissioner Clement, if you're speaking, you're still on mute.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The advantage of dynamic pricing is twofold. Number one, it's really not about getting more revenue. It's about providing an incentive for people not to overpark certain neighborhoods. And secondly, I think that although we may not have a consensus on it, the report we got tonight from the Ballston Virginia Square Civic Association, which has 19,000 residents, also indicated there's consensus against paid parking by Lion Village Civic Association, by Aurora Highlands Civic Association, and by Clarendon Courthouse. That's a lot of people, and it also is most of the people along the R&B and Route 1 corridors. So that's where we've got the issue. Now, again, where dynamic pricing would come in, if it were implemented, if we could implement it, is that those guys would be taken care of by the high price that commuters or guests would experience in those neighborhoods. Whereas in other neighborhoods, for example, those north of Lee Highway and some parts of South Arlington, the price would be much more tolerable. And so those people who had the space would make it available to others. So again, I keep getting back to what Mr. Letelme said. It's not that this is a bad idea. It's just that it's premature. And so, for example, now we're talking about option A and option B. I was leaning towards option B, but I see that option A is closer to feasibility because Mr. Krim has advised us that studies have been done, a methodology has been established, and there is a database. And though it would be a pain in the ass to, perhaps a pain in the ass to maintain, it's still doable. And I think the argument for limiting permits for people who have off-street parking is very strong. So, you know, I think basically in certain ways, the proposal has gotten ahead of itself. And people have to recognize that you have to use technology. Sometimes you cannot do without technology in order to achieve equitable outcomes, and we need to realize that. Over.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Clement. I just wanted to jump in here and say a couple of things. First is I definitely kind of agree with Commissioner Buck that that it's unlikely we're going to get to the point of like full-on dynamic pricing in residential zones. I think we're probably likely to end up with more of a district-based approach at some point. I do think we were probably going to learn a few things as part of the performance parking pilot that will be helpful and indicative of what how parking demand in Arlington varies based on distance, right? We're going to see just how much demand falls off from a pricing standpoint as you get farther and farther from the urban core as we are adjusting our metered zones in the commercial zones. And I think that's going to be helpful to understand what kind of pricing people would and would not pay, you know, a block off of the Clarendon Strip in an RPP block, which like we totally have that sort of thing. So I'm inclined to hold off on paid parking, at least until we've implemented the performance parking pilot and have a better sense of what the market price for on-street parking is in Arlington and how that varies by distance from the commercial core. And then I also wanted to say, as far as A versus B, I think I'm coming down for B at this point of not hard capping, and that's I have two sort of unintended consequence concerns with A. The first is that I think it may induce some people who were already thinking about it to build off-street parking on their lot. They decide, you know, I've got 3 cars, now I can only get 2. Or I've got, instead of, you know, duking it out on the street, I'm just going to build myself, you know, a driveway, and that way I can park. I'm the only person who can park there. I don't have to fight with people on the street anymore. And if they're building a driveway on the side of the street that has on-street parking, that actually reduces the shared parking supply on street. That essentially privatizes some on-street space because that curb cut is now a place where other people can't park in front of anymore. And the second is people are smart and act in their self-interest. And if we hard cap the number of permits per household, I think we will end up creating a secondary market that probably maybe slightly exists right now, but not really in RPP vehicle permits. Hey, I want 3, but because I have off-street parking, I can only have 2. Well, my neighbor down the street only has 1. And so he can get his second for only $35 or whatever. He'll sell it to me for $50 a year, and I'm not even paying the $150 that I would have paid straight to the county for my 4th permit. So I think those 2 unintended consequences give me a little bit of concern, and I just don't feel strongly enough that A is the right option to fight what we've heard as far as public opposition to the notion of hard capping the permits personally. So where I'm falling right now is B, and revisit paid parking in RPP zones after the performance parking pilot has come through, after we've had some more time to think about and work on enforcement, and after people have gotten used to this set of RPP changes. I feel like to some extent maybe we're just trying to change too much all at once. So that's what I think I have to say at this point. Are other people wanting to weigh in further on this conversation? Oh, perhaps we've all talked ourselves out.
Commissioner Slot, yeah, I'll say I'll support you in that as well. I am on the fence around the paid parking, and knowing what I know now, I'm comfortable delaying that in the way that you're talking about, and getting some more feedback in a sense, the same way we were looking at in the previous discussion. So I'm supportive of that as well.
All right, well, seeing no other people jumping to put their hands up, I'm going to put a motion on the table, and we'll see where it goes from there, just in the interest of moving things forward. So I'm going to move that the Transportation Commission recommends that the County Board approve the proposed Option B changes to the residential parking permit program as outlined in the draft board report dated January 31st, 2021, with the exception of the allowance for paid parking, which the Commission recommends be deferred until a robust plan addressing enforcement can be developed and pending the results of the county's performance parking pilot.
I'll second the motion.
That's seconded by Commissioner Clement. Is there Commission discussion, which I would highly encourage, no matter whether you're going to vote in favor of that motion, offer an amendment, or vote against it? I feel like I want to give the board as much context as far as where we had consensus and where we did not, and where people were falling on this issue as possible. So Commissioner Yeri got his hand up first.
Yeah, I am not going to support the motion as proposed. Like I said, I have feelings about option A, and also going back to the idea, I would rather get the paid parking moving now and learn about it and make it better, because I'm worried that it's going to consistently be a thing that we'll just not be ready for if we don't just move forward and do it. This isn't a matter of life and death. This is a matter of adding more paid parking to residential areas. It is a welcome change in my mind, even if it is a rocky start. But rocky starts, this is a rocky start that can be fixed without people being seriously or grievously injured. So that's where I am.
Thank you, Commissioner Yeri. Commissioner Buck.
I would align myself with Commissioner Yeri. I'm not comfortable pegging anything to the outcome of the performance parking pilot, simply because, one, that's going to take a long time to get up and running, and two, I just don't think that we should be pursuing in any way any sort of dynamic pricing for RPP. It's any sort of dynamic pricing in a commercial area costs millions, and for RPP, it will just no RPP fee collection, 2-hour parking, anything will ever conceivably justify any dynamic pricing for 2-hour parking in RPP, and it is the wrong road to go down pursuing that. At best, we get to zone parking to tweak in some day in a far off year, and I feel like existing occupancy in paid blocks adjoining RPP and payment history in RPP that comes out of approving 2-hour parking is the only reliable way to get to tweaking pricing to match demand. So I am not going to support the motion, both for my like of option A and B. I just don't feel comfortable in any way implying that dynamic pricing is ever going to be appropriate. As elegant as dynamic pricing is, it is just never going to be practical for RPP.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Commissioner Lantelmi. Commissioner Lantelmi, if you're speaking, you are muted.
Sure. Even putting aside the dynamic pricing, can you hear me?
Yes.
I have been having some problems getting through right now. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, I will be supporting the motion. Even if dynamic pricing doesn't work for RPP zones, which is entirely possible, I have no particular reason to think one way or another. I do feel the fact that there is not sufficient flexibility to look at blocks or even subzones within the larger zones, until we can get that better nailed down, and until we can get enforcement better nailed down, it is premature, I think, to put in the paid parking. I'm absolutely willing to go ahead with option B and the changes to the RPP. I think these are well thought out and definitely called for. But I think the paid parking, which ultimately is a good idea, is not yet ready, especially during the pandemic times. I would like to hold off on that. I definitely will vote with the deferral, and I will support the motion that's on the floor. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Price, you're up next.
Mr. Chair, I respect your motion. I respect your inclination on this. I'm also in the same camp as Commissioner Yeary and Commissioner Buck. We need to move forward with this, and we need to move forward with this now. Get the information as it is going forward, and then at some point when the program comes up for a revised or a chance to review the data, review the information, is this the best way of going forward? We can review it then, but I think we need to move forward right now with recommendation on number A, as well as I do not believe in dynamic parking. That's just not going to happen in residential neighborhoods. And charge for parking, period. Charge for it.
Thank you, everybody. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? All right, then we will move to a vote on the motion. Commissioner Clement.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Commissioner Brose.
I'm going to vote aye.
Commissioner Price.
No.
Commissioner Bruno. Oh, I think Commissioner Bruno actually had to go. I got an email from him earlier. Sorry about that. Moving. Commissioner Lantelmi.
Aye.
I will vote yes. Commissioner Buck.
No.
Commissioner Muradovic.
No.
Commissioner Yeary.
No.
And Commissioner Fesswerk.
I'm neutral on this. I can't. I'm really on the fence.
Abstention is an allowed vote.
I'm genuinely abstaining for this one. I'm really on the fence.
All right. That vote is 3 in favor to 4 against and 1 abstention. So that motion fails.
Oh.
So somebody else is going to want to put a motion on the table.
Yeah. Close.
I will move that that the Transportation Commission recommends approval of the county manager's recommendation with the option A pricing plan unmodified.
There's a motion. Is there a second? All right, there's a second. Would anyone like to speak to this motion? I feel like probably it's already been said. Commissioner Yeary, his hand is up.
I mean, I'd be curious to understand how we could kind of come to a resolution here, so we don't end up in a
yeah. Is there a way we can
cyclic graph?
Yeah, mention some sort of yeah. I don't need it. Yeah.
I would love to see something regarding stronger enforcement or implement enforcement provisions. Sorry, we're jumping around. Sorry.
I'll go for a moment. I think maybe the concern about too much too fast is a little bit of what those who voted for the prior motion was a little concerned about, and wanting some more data. And I understand the other side of that argument. That being said, for me, it feels like it's not being listened. We've not been listening to our residents, honestly. I'm with change, and I manage change for a living. That's what I do. And nobody likes change, and I'm with you, Commissioner Price. Just make it happen. On the other hand, I do feel as a public servant here that I need to be somewhat responsive to the concerns that have been raised by our community. And in that case, I think the one thing that we can sort of put a stop on and implement later is the paid parking. So that's where I would have landed.
Thank you, Commissioner Brose. Commissioner Muradovic.
Yeah, I just have a question out of curiosity. So we talked about, going one way or the other and then evaluating things down the road. Is there a process for this evaluation? Do we know what that would look like? I mean, or is there a set date, like, after a year we're going to evaluate this, or are we just going to be kicking the can down the road and then maybe, do something about it if people complain enough? So that's kind of my question.
Mr. Krim, do you want to speak to that at all?
Sure. And real quick, since there's been lots of really nice praise, I'll just recognize the many people on this call who have helped get us to here. So anyway, the question of next steps in evaluation, we have said that we would be, coming back to the board with a report on how the program has been operating for the past, in 2 years' time or 2 years post-adoption. I will caution, however, that the kinds of data collection that we did before getting to this proposal was paid for out of special allocations from the budget. We are not budgeted to provide that kind of comprehensive data of on-the-ground occupancy. So we are certainly happy to come back and speak about how, what we have heard, how the operations have gone, how many permits have been purchased, what we've heard from the community, but I am not able to commit to the kinds of data intensive process that we've given this.
Thank you. Commissioner Clement, you're up next.
Yes, this is a point of order. Could you recite the vote on the last motion?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. My record of the vote on the last motion was, oh, thank you. I think I counted wrong. Yes, it was 4 in favor and 4 against with 1 abstention.
That's what I thought. And I know that it did not pass. But as you pointed out, the county is very interested in how we vote.
Yes, thank you so much. I miscounted the yays and undercounted them by 1 when I stated it. But yes, it was 4-4 with 1 abstention. Thank you very much. Did you have something else, Commissioner Clement, or just that?
That's it.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Yeri, back to you.
Yeah, I'm thinking of how to best phrase this without putting my foot in my mouth. I think, Commissioner Burrows, your point about being mindful of the community is a very good one. It is something I'm very, very mindful of myself. At the same time, I'm also thinking about, we've talked a lot about the letter from the Ballston, Virginia Square Civic Association tonight, and they mention how they represent 19,000 citizens. At the same time, as somebody who lives in that neighborhood, I also know that the majority of those 19,000 citizens live south of Fairfax Drive. That those folks are not a part of that those civic association meetings. They are the folks who are currently excluded from being able to park or have their friends come into town and park on those streets a short walk from the street. They don't have the same kind of relationship with the county office to when things happen on Quincy Boulevard, when things happen on Quincy, when they happen on Wilson Boulevard, when changes need to be made, they don't get that same kind of benefit of the doubt or that same kind of helping, happy to listen ear that folks who live in other parts of the neighborhood might get. Mm-hmm. So when I'm thinking about the change that this will make in these neighborhoods, that is something I'm very much mindful of. That's how these things often shake out, I find, is that for the vast, vast majority of folks who live in the county, they're either indifferent, frankly, or they support, but they don't show up. So I always try to be really mindful of not overweighting some of the feedback we hear. While it's important, it's important to try and root out what's there and understand it. I try to be very careful about not overweighting it because I know it often isn't representative. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Yeri. Commissioner Lantelmi, I want to jump to you.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether it would make sense for us, and I'm not throwing a motion out yet, but for discussion purposes, having first a vote on between A and B, not touching yet on the paid parking, make a determination on that, and then do a vote on the paid parking component. rather than having everything be up and down for the entire ball of wax.
Do we need a vote on that, or do we just need a sense of it? I have to admit, I'm not.
Yeah, I'm trying to get a sense.
Yeah, I mean, A and B to me actually are not super critical, so my vote might go with the majority.
I'm certainly open to it. I am also cognizant of the fact that this particular agenda item has stretched well into the evening so far, and we still have several items after it. So I'm not 100% convinced that it particularly helps move us forward to go that route. And we do have a motion before us that will have to be dealt with before we can do anything there. I did want to say, like I said, I've been of many minds about these various options over the course of the meeting. Were the commission amenable to adding something to the motion, strongly urging the county to develop a robust, proactive enforcement plan? I would be able to bring myself to come on board with the motion as it currently stands before us to get us to a majority. And I know enforcement is certainly something that many people have spoken of having concerns about, especially when it comes to the paid parking aspect. Commissioner Buck, you still have your hand up.
I was going to suggest the same thing. The lack of specificity around enforcement of 2-hour parking has been a huge complaint, and while it's one that I am personally I can personally look past, I think it's a defensible point, and certainly deferring implementation of 2-hour paid parking element of option A is something I'd be amenable to. I'd sure like to see some time restriction on it to sort of say, to give staff time to gin up some sort of implementation plan that would trip implementation of 2-hour.
Great. I'm just going to ask then if there is unanimous consent to amend this motion to further add that the commission recommends that the county board direct staff to develop a robust proactive enforcement plan for paid parking within RPP.
Could you reread the motion, because I can't follow it?
Absolutely. I am asking if there is unanimous assent to amend this motion to recommend that the commission, let me start again.
Could you read the main motion? I don't know what the main motion is.
Oh, the main motion. Yes, yeah. The main motion is that the Transportation Commission recommends that the county board adopt the updates to RPP as outlined within the option A portion of the ordinance. So it's basically like the county manager's recommendation, and that's the motion that's before us on the table, is the county manager's recommendation. Commissioner Brose, I'm going to mute you because I'm getting a little bit of feedback of my output back into myself. Oh, actually, I don't have the ability to do that. Never mind. Anyway, so what I'm asking is if there is unanimous assent to amend that motion, so the motion as it currently stands, but furthermore, that the commission recommends that the county board direct staff to develop a robust proactive enforcement plan for paid parking within RPP.
I would agree to that.
Does anyone object to it is really the question. All right, hearing no objections. Oh, sorry, was someone speaking? Sorry, I didn't hear something. Okay, hearing no objections, then that motion to amend passes automatically if nobody objects to it. That's everybody voting in favor. So now the motion as amended is the county manager's recommendation, which is option A, but that furthermore, the Transportation Commission recommends that the county board direct staff to, oh my gosh, it's getting late. Develop a robust proactive enforcement plan for paid parking within RPP. Is there further discussion of that motion as it has just been amended? I'm prepared to support it. Okay, seeing no hands up, let's vote on that motion as it has been amended. Commissioner Clement.
No.
Commissioner Brose.
Oh, I'll vote for it. Aye.
Commissioner Price.
Aye.
Lantelmi.
Nay.
I will vote yes. Commissioner Buck.
Aye.
Commissioner Muradovic.
Aye.
Commissioner Yeri.
Aye.
Commissioner Fessy-Work, you going to continue to abstain, or would you like to jump in on this one?
I want to say aye. For this one, I want to say aye, yes.
Yes. Okay, great. So that motion as amended passes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to 2. There we go. And that is option A plus enforcement. Fantastic. Thank you again, Mr. Krim, for your amazing work on this and hard work on this and sitting through way too many meetings of all sorts and types. I appreciate everyone who has helped move this forward, and I'm going to recommend that the commission take a 5-minute pause, and then we will continue with our agenda in just a couple minutes.
I kind of miss not having the cookies in the back room.
Ditto. That's like one of my only excuses ever to buy sweets was for Transportation Commission.
The simple things in life.
All right, it's been 5 minutes by my watch, so I happy to get back into it.
Our next item is item number 4, the Community Energy Plan Update. And Rich Dooley is here to give the staff overview. Take it away, Rich.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mr. Best, and thanks to Chairman Slatt, as well as to all the Transportation Commission members. I appreciate the time tonight, and what I plan to do is offer a brief PowerPoint slide deck that is going to highlight the implementation framework update that we're currently working on, and then be around to answer any questions you might have. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Keep my fingers crossed that IT works for us, and hopefully you have up on screen a PowerPoint presentation in full screen.
Yep, looks great.
Great, thank you so much. So again, my name is Rich Dooley. I'm part of the Rethink Energy team and the county's Community Energy Coordinator. If you recall back, when we came before the Transportation Commission back in the past, in 2018 and 2019, county staff were working with the community to update the Community Energy Plan itself. As a reminder, the Community Energy Plan is part of the comprehensive plan for the county. It shows a variety of different goals and policies related to energy here in Arlington County between now and out to the year 2050. The overarching goal within the plan is to make Arlington carbon neutral as a community by the year 2050. That was actually one of the biggest commitments by the county board in terms of a change during that update. In September 2019, as the county board was hearing the rest of the community energy plan, on screen here you see some of the additional items that were signed off on and adopted by the county board for those renewed commitments and more ambitious commitments in renewable electricity for both county government activities as well as for the community. There you see the milestones and the goals there. Equity issues, ensuring that we don't have the case of haves versus have-nots, but rather we look at the benefits of the community energy plan implementation and allowing for everybody across the board to benefit from that community energy plan. And then last but not least, in the transportation sector in particular, electric vehicles became much more pronounced in this plan compared to the plan from 2013. And we are in the midst of developing an electric vehicle and the electric vehicle charging infrastructure master plan, and to have that out by the year 2022. The next couple of slides will just simply highlight, again, the policies that are listed in the 6 different community energy plan goal areas. Those goal areas include buildings, resilience, renewable energy, and then transportation, what we do with our county government activities, and then the education behavior change section. And again, there you see listed at the top for transportation, our goal to reduce the vehicle miles traveled, increasing multimodalism, developing that EV and EVSE plan, and overall reducing the amount of carbon produced by the transportation sector. Now, the implementation framework that we're talking about tonight is a companion document. It's an administrative document that is more dynamic than the community energy plan itself, which needs to be adopted by the county board, and any changes to that CEP needs to be adopted by the county board. The implementation framework is more at the county manager and county staff level, where we're able to recognize changes in technologies on an as-needed basis service market transformations and modify our strategies and our actions to implement the policies and to help our community reach the CEP goals. So these next two slides are just a sampling of some of the strategies that are listed in the draft strategic, or I should say, implementation framework that is currently out for comment. Before I finish up tonight, I will put in the chat room for this meeting a link for you and everybody in the public to go ahead and to go to the actual 100-plus page document, which is the implementation framework, and provide comments on the document itself. So I will go ahead and do that in a little bit. Moving forward to transportation, these are just a couple of, I believe there are 12 strategies currently out of a total of 63 strategies that are listed in the implementation framework. These three are a sampling of the 12 in the transportation realm. And again, they focus on EV charging and the development of that plan and so forth. So what we've done to get to this stage, back in 2018 and 2019, as we were updating the community energy plan, we asked the public for comments on that plan. As they provided the comments, invariably some of the comments applied more to the implementation framework than they did to the goals and policies in the CEP. So we put those off to the side, the ones that didn't apply to the CEP itself, and then we came back to it after the CEP was adopted in September 2019, and we started work on putting more information in detail on those various ideas and weaving them into the list of those, at one point in time, over 120 strategies that the community came up with. We ended up consolidating that down to 63, and that is what's currently out for comment until February 15th in the draft implementation framework. During 2019 and into 2020, the AIR team went ahead and used the 9 criteria that you see there to help prioritize the implementation framework strategies. So right now the strategies are listed 1 through 63 in a prioritized fashion based on the scores that they received through looking at the criteria that you see listed there. We went ahead and prepared the draft, first draft of the implementation framework to be released to county departments. So CPHD and a variety of others received it and provided their comments. We incorporated those comments into the draft implementation framework to create version 2, and that is the version that is out on the Conveo site and out for public comment. We created a few short videos to describe the implementation framework sections. And then we also went into a series of different community group and commission meetings to do presentations like tonight and answer any questions that people had. We're continuing that through next week. And then on February 15th, once again, that comment period will be rounded out. It'll end up being about a 2-month comment period for the document at that point in time. We'll collect all the comments that came in through the various meetings, through the online website, as well as 2 public forums that took place in late January. We held those public forums. Close to 100 people participated in total in those 2 different public forums held on Microsoft Teams. And we'll incorporate all those various comments that we received as we take a look at the implementation framework and how to improve upon that. That will take us through February and March, and then we're going to bring it up to the county manager for comment and consideration, and then the next plan would be to bring it forward to the county board for their thoughts and consideration. One thing I do want to mention is a variety of comments that we've been receiving from a number of different groups is that the implementation framework in its structure and framework right now and the format is that it's somewhat confusing and it's difficult to follow the actual roadmap between now and the year 2050 in helping us reach our goals. And so depending on after we read all the comments, and I envision the comments will number more than 200 as at the rate that we're going now, we may very well have to step back and restructure and reformat the implementation framework the way it is shown right now to make it more of a roadmap. But that remains to be seen if that's going to take place. And if it does take place, the timeline that you see here may change in terms of when the county board will end up seeing that roadmap or that revised document. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and make myself available for any and all comments, questions that you might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dooley. It's great to see you again at the commission. If any commissioners have questions or comments, please go ahead and stick your hand up. The main thing that jumped out at me reading over the implementation framework is it refers very generally over and over again to electric vehicles. And I'm concerned that that's very easy to read essentially as electric cars and electric buses and not necessarily include electric bikes. Do you feel like the intent currently in the implementation framework is inclusive of e-bikes as a means to move us towards our improved energy future? I think they are, especially when focusing on equity, the barrier to entry there is so much lower than an electric car, but they still need charging infrastructure. They are certainly can be a great way to bridge that last mile transportation gap that we're always dealing with. Can you speak to that at all?
It's a very interesting observation and comment. And I can say that originally planned, the electric vehicle and the electric vehicle charging infrastructure did have a primary focus on vehicles such as automobiles, sedans, if you will, with a focus on that, as well as the county fleet, which could include buses as well. So e-bikes, I would say, did not get much airplay in the development of and consideration in developing that plan. But that's a great thought that you have, and I'm going to take that back to our staff who are working on that plan, ask them the question, because they're going to be the ones who are going to be working on getting that plan together and out the door by 2022. And we should go ahead and be able to come back to you sooner rather than later with a response as to how e-bikes will be incorporated into that plan. But I'm a bicyclist myself, and I definitely see the benefits to including that in some sort of plan.
Thank you. I see a couple hands now, so I'm going to jump to other commissioners. Commissioner Lantelmi, I think your hand was up first.
Yeah, I definitely want to associate myself with Commissioner Stott's comments on e-bikes. I prefer the question about electric vehicles. If the fleet is going to be changing, and I think it might be changing more rapidly than we originally thought, GM is saying it's going to sell only electric vehicles, I think, by 2030 or 35. How will we be dealing with houses, buildings that don't have chargers? We don't have chargers along the streets. Older apartment buildings don't have parking lots necessarily where the cars could be charged. Where can we charge? How can we build some sort of charging system to get to a large number of places where people live that they can't put a charger in? We have to be thinking forward, I guess is what I'm saying. And I don't think there's anything really in the plan to say how we will get chargers in more places that will make it accessible and make it doable for somebody who lives in an apartment on the 30th floor and doesn't have a parking space in the building to be able to park their car, assuming they still want to have a car. I'll pass that. That's the comment.
Well, it's a great comment and question altogether. The electric vehicle and electric vehicle charging infrastructure plan will get to that. So the framework that we have right now, if you go online and the link on how to comment and where to comment on the actual document is in the chat room now. So if you were to go to that and you go to, I think it's strategy number 22, but don't quote me on that. I don't have a scripture and verse as to which strategy it is on the EV plan. It is going to be probably 1 to 2 pages with the basics as to what the plan would look like. But the plan in of itself is going to be much more verbose and much lengthier, and will go into much greater detail to get to your question and to address your concerns as well as your question. And so the strategic plan framework is not going to offer those great details, particularly for those items that we have not fully formed and fully fleshed out. But for a number of the different items that are in there, we can either have ongoing programs that we can point to and websites we can point to, or there will be subsequent project timelines and project reports, such as an energy assurance plan, which we're going to be starting up momentarily. And that plan in and of itself is going to be much more illustrative and demonstrative as to what we can and should do in regards to those topics. So I guess the best I can say is stay tuned till 2022 for more details and a draft for you to respond to individually and as a commission.
I mean, I think the clear answer here is protected bike lanes with paid EV electric vehicle chargers in the buffer between the bike lane and the parking. But that's just that's my joke answer. On to Commissioner Buck, who is up next.
It's running a lot of cable putting back parking meters at each spot, which has a cable attached to it.
Anyway, Commissioner Buck, you're up next.
So I have not read the implementation framework. I did read the original plan, and I think one of my concerns with the original plan was that in the transportation section, it relied on two main parts to reduce the transportation burden on greenhouse gases. One was on EV adoption and encouraging that, and two was full implementation of the master transportation plan. Chairman Slatt mentioned protected bike lanes. We have a wonderful, now almost 2 years old bike element of the master transportation plan, and it has not been implemented. It has languished. Do any of your implementation framework items deal with accelerating adoption and mainstreaming of the multimodal aspects of the master transportation plan in order to achieve the greenhouse gas reduction goals?
The word that I'll focus on that you used was accelerating, and I would say we are working together with Mr. Leach and everybody within the transportation department of the county to support them and to do everything that we can to help them in their endeavors to implement that MTP as quickly and as swiftly as possible. But that is, we see that as their plan to go ahead and to implement and so forth, and we play a support role, and we're happy to support in any way, shape, or form that we can. And if they want to accelerate it, we're right behind them, supporting them and backing them up.
Great, thank you. I just want to associate myself with Mr. Buck's remarks right there, and then move on to Commissioner Moradovich.
Yes, thank you. It seems like a lot of thought has gone into this, and full disclosure, I have not read all the proposals yet, so I look forward to going through them because it seems like there's some great ideas. The one concern just off the bat that I have is that we do not repeat the mistakes of perhaps previous generations and lock ourselves into a car-centric infrastructure for an urban setting, because we are talking about moving around in Arlington, not moving from Arlington to Roanoke. I'd like to also associate myself with Chairman Slatt's comment about the e-bikes, because one of the categories used in evaluating these proposals is Arlington a leader? And Arlington is a leader in so many things here in the U.S., but if we compare it globally, we're behind quite a bit. And we already see in European cities that have become so congested, not only from vehicular traffic, but their public transportation has been burdened so much that they are basically giving 500 euro subsidies for people to buy electric bikes just to get them off the road, because their infrastructure cannot bear these vehicles of any sort, whether they have a battery or whether it's an internal combustion engine. So given that this is a very forward-looking document, looking deep into the future, that's a possibility to have on the horizon, that we just might not have space to put all this stuff, regardless of how it's powered, and might have to have more people just riding on e-bikes. So, thank you.
Wonderful comments. Let me just say that we do fully support the multimodal transportation ethos that we see in the master transportation plan. And again, the comments that I'm hearing loud and clear about including e-bikes and having them incorporated into this framework, great points. And thank you for any and all information you have on those e-bike subsidies in Europe or anything else. The comment section or the comment website that is in your chat room is a fantastic place to go ahead and drop in links and to let us know about those situations and those references, because we can drop that into either an existing or a new strategy as a reference. So we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks. Commissioner Clement, you're up next.
All right, this is a question about electric vehicle charging stations. Last month, the Transportation Commission recommended and the county board adopted the site plan for a new complex, residential complex in Roslyn called the Ames Center, featuring two 30-story residential towers. And regarding EV, it says, during the public review process, the applicant noted that a high number of parking spaces is electric ready. The project proposes to install EV charging stations in approximately 2% of total parking spaces. This is typical of new development and does not meet the baseline prerequisite outlined in the updated green building incentive policy for site plan projects. So my question to you is, do you believe that the EV provisions in this particular site plan contribute to the goals of the CEP?
Great question. I would have to go back to our staff that focus on site plan projects with Jessica Aberlin and Joan Kelsch. They work with developers as well as county staff and the developer teams to ensure that if additional density is wanted, that there are things being done in turn so that we see an improved project to relate to that additional density that is given through that green building density incentive program. That particular project, the Ames Center project, I could not tell you, and your question's a good one. So let me go ahead and put that as an action item for myself to go back to staff and get back to you with some updates in regards to the EV charging infrastructure and its relation to that site plan.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Buck, back to you.
Would you mind giving us a quick overview, if you could, of the transportation-related implementation items that are not related to EV, or if there are any?
Sure, I'd be happy to. One of the strategies is just recognizing, obviously transit. And enhancing transit travel and supporting that here in Arlington with, I would say, obviously, with the ART bus fleet as well as with Metro, working together, not solo, but working together with federal, state, regional partners across the board so as to support that sort of transportation. Also, there is as we noted, the MTP, which has a number of different elements in comments heretofore. We've already heard about the bike plan, but there's also the pedestrian portion of the MTP. There's the idea of something that we're living as we speak with teleworking. And so forth, and the previous item in tonight's meeting on parking and parking demand and so forth. That's all part and parcel of supporting the MTP, which is one of our strategies. Another piece is equity. As I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, the county board recognized that we went into the community energy planning process with three primary lenses through which we looked at program development as well as implementation of the CEP. And those three primary lenses were economic competitiveness, secondly was environmental commitment, and thirdly, and again, in no particular order, was energy security. And then the county board added a fourth lens, and that was for us to ensure that we incorporated energy equity and equity issues into the work that we do. So one of our strategies is to step back and to add that lens and to look at existing programs as well as new programs to make sure everything is equitable across all socioeconomic groups and so forth. And working together with Samia Bird, the Chief Race and Equity Officer in the County Manager's Office, to make sure that we're on the same wavelength as her and the work that she is doing across multiple departments. The correlation of, although it's tied to EVs, it's also on how electric vehicles can help with resilience and provide battery backup. So the resilience piece is also built into this, and also how renewable energy can help power the building, as well as how can help power those electric vehicles as well. And then let's see, the last but not least is just discussion and research into autonomous vehicles and the potential for doing pilot testing for autonomous vehicles and what that would mean, working together with our transportation department, obviously. And last but not least, with air quality, it's examining the vehicle idling law that's currently on the books and making sure that that is adequately enforced so as to further increase the indoor, or I should say outdoor air quality in Arlington and in the region.
All right. Thank you. Anyone else? I'm not seeing any other hands. All right, great. Thank you, Mr. Dooley. And
I have one comment.
Late firing comment here from Commissioner Reddick.
Yeah, just as a thought exercise, have you all even considered maybe having parts of the county be car free? Because like Hamburg in Germany plans to have I don't know if it's just the center of the city or even broader to be car free by 2034. So I mean, just as a thought exercise, that might be valuable going forward in terms of evaluating other possibilities on the horizon.
Great comment. I think that would be a wonderful discussion together with our planning department and CPHD, as well as with transportation, and to find out what their plans are. And I would say, obviously, that feeds right into the multimodal transportation aspect overall for our 26 square miles here of Arlington County. So thank you for the comment.
And yeah, it would make our job easier, because then we wouldn't have to worry about RPP.
God, you bet.
Awesome, Mr. Dooley. Look forward to seeing the final plan down to brass tacks and individual policies, and wish you the best of luck in the meantime.
Thank you very much, Chairman Slad, and to all commissioners. Thank you for your time. Have a good night.
Thank you.
And our next item is item number 5. This is the Vision Zero overview, and Christine Baker is here from DES Transportation to give you an overview. Christine, you're muted.
Thank you so much for having us tonight. I'm opening up my PowerPoint now. Hopefully you'll be seeing it shortly. There we are. This is the latest I think I've been up since my son was born a year ago. So hopefully I'll be making sense at this time. But thank you all for having us tonight. And also a big thanks to Chris Yari for being our representative on the Vision Zero External Stakeholders Group. Hopefully he's been relaying a lot of the information to you on our project and giving you status updates. Here's our action planning timeline. We're in our last public engagement milestone phase and nearing a final action plan. It's been a collaborative and data-driven effort over the past year to get to this point. So tonight we're going to talk about how we developed the draft action plan in collaboration with our key stakeholders in the public, And we'll describe the analysis work that we did to inform the process quickly. Then we'll talk about the draft action items, which are the foundation for the action plan, and lay out the framework for this transportation safety program, and talk about how we're going to implement those actions over the next 5 years. So as you know, we invited representatives from the county's committees, commissions, and community organizations to participate in an external stakeholders group, which met every other month during the development of the action plan. We had a brief pause during the onset of the pandemic, but they provided great insights on how, on local safety issues, helped to spread the word about the program, and will continue to support the Vision Zero program moving forward. So thanks again, Chris, for your participation in that group. We also assembled an interdepartmental stakeholders group made up of staff from any county department that related to transportation. And that group met monthly since fall of 2019 and has been instrumental in shaping this plan and identifying ways that Arlington can tackle transportation safety issues through interdisciplinary action is the focus. And that group will continue to meet. So we've been very thankful to have the insights and dedication from various stakeholders and from the community. We've had 3 public engagement phases, so members of the community have also played a large role in crafting the draft action plan. Phase 1 engagement took place in January and February of this year. The objective was for the community to establish goals and priorities for the program. So we hosted an open house, we collected feedback online, and we held 5 pop-up events to help get the word out, reaching about 900 people. Phase 2 took place in fall of 2020. This checkpoint was a little different because of our virtual environment, but the objective was for the community to help staff identify safety concerns and needs. So we hosted a public meeting virtually, and then we collected feedback online. We also sent out postcards to addresses in hard to reach census population areas. We posted ads on art buses. We hosted a call-in line to collect feedback and got about 500 responses, which was great. And then phase 3 is happening right now through the end of February, and we are seeking to gather feedback on the draft action plan. Once again, we're hosting engagement virtually. Spoiler, this presentation might look a lot like the public presentation at our public meeting that we'll have on February 11th. And again, we send out postcards, and we're actually hosting a stand at Central Library now where members of the community can pick up a copy of the online engagement form and complete it and return it by mail. So if you know anyone who's interested in learning more or sharing feedback, but they're not able to get online, those materials are available at the socially distanced Central Library holds pickup area. So what did we learn from the community? Through these engagement efforts, we learned about community values, which helped us create and refine our 6 goals for the program. And those goals include ensuring safety for all modes, putting safety first in all county planning policies and programs, being transparent, responsive, and accountable in our commitment to transportation safety, using data to make informed decisions, getting everyone, that includes residents, workers, visitors, any partners on board with the community culture of safety. And last but certainly not least, prioritizing safety improvements with vulnerable communities. Our goal is that the transportation system is equally accessible and safe for all communities. We also learned about community challenges. So, that helped us to create and refine our action items and objectives for the action plan. So the things that popped up in the engagement efforts included speeding and aggressive driving, distracted users was another big concern, crossings and conditions for pedestrians and bicycles boiled to the top, as well as conditions at intersections or driveways, and then other issues related to signage, wayfinding, maintenance. We had that clickable map that we're still analyzing the results of to really get to know what the perceived safety issues are to help augment our data. And then to help develop the plan, we also did a lot of technical work in addition to all this public engagement. So we conducted a peer review of Vision Zero cities. We conducted a systemic review to identify common factors and circumstances that surrounded our severe and fatal crashes. We established a high injury network to help us focus and prioritize on the corridors that are most likely to experience severe and fatal crashes, which is shown at right. And we did an annual analysis of crash crash trends, identifying hotspots, and implementing improvements to help mitigate future crashes. And we also reviewed crash data in combination with public health data. So I think you've seen a lot of this data in our previous engagement. I'll flip through it pretty quickly. We, in our systemic crash analysis, saw that while pedestrian, bicycle, and motorcycle crashes are very small slivers of the larger, crash pie chart, those are the modes that we see most of the critical crashes. Pedestrian, especially, we see over half of our fatal crashes involve a pedestrian. So these are the modes that we really want to focus on as part of the Vision Zero program. And then you can also see some of these factors that popped up. Alcohol crashes, almost half of fatal crashes involved alcohol. Almost half of fatal crashes occurred at night. Speeding and turning are also big factors. So we wanted to boil down kind of what are the challenges that we need to tackle. And then this map kind of shows some of the systemic findings on a geographic scale. So you can see, we saw more alcohol-related crashes at night in the northern part of the county. We saw more bike and pedestrian crashes along the RB corridor and down in Crystal City. And then on roads like Columbia Pike and on Glebe, we saw more turning-related crashes. And then we also saw areas where there were more crashes at night. So there's lots of different ways that we can look at this and think about infrastructure and policy and program improvements to help address these severe and fatal crashes and kind of tailor that to their environment. And then, as I mentioned, we reviewed our crash data in combination with public health data, like the map shown at left with the areas of higher diversity in relation to the high injury network, or at right with areas of higher poverty in relation to the high injury network, to understand how these areas with lower socioeconomic opportunity are more likely to experience severe crashes. So all this work is described in more detail on the Vision Zero website and in the draft action plan if you want to dive into it. But that takes us into our action items. So we used all this information that I just talked through to craft the Vision Zero action items. And those action items will guide the program over the next 5 years. They're categorized into 4 categories: data and evaluation, process and organization, engagement, and partnerships. And so more detail on specific action items, highlight the responsibilities are provided in that Vision Zero action plan and available on the website. But thinking about data and using information to lead our action on safety, we identified the following 9 action items: to improve the quality of our crash data, to gather additional data to support safety analysis like speeds, behavioral characteristics, community reported issues, to perform a yearly crash analysis, to identify inequities in transportation safety, like understanding why areas of lower income or higher diversity experience more severe crashes, conducting a quarterly review of severe and fatal crashes to identify quick action, analyzing crashes and safety conditions in our daily activities, like reviewing concerns reported by community members, staff, or partners, regularly reporting on progress on the Vision Zero program, hosting an annual survey of perceived safety in Arlington. So that would include something like a clickable map, similar to what you may have seen in the Phase 2 engagement effort. And that information will support other safety analysis. And also conducting before and after studies of new infrastructure or policies to understand if these actions are making a difference or if we might need to try something new. We identified 10 process and organization related action items that includes building upon the existing MTP elements to create a unified MTP with safety as a cornerstone, evaluating the way we review and collaborate site developments and capital projects, excuse me, creating a way to identify, prioritize, and implement short and long-term safety improvements to ensure that we are addressing our most severe crashes and most vulnerable populations first, establishing a funding source for safety projects in the Vision Zero program, encouraging safe vehicle speeds through a review of existing speed limits and infrastructure. So that would start with our high injury network and then work towards other roads. updating existing county design standards and guidelines, and creating new ones to ensure consistent and best practices in all of our work, publishing a multimodal safety toolbox, implementing data-driven and equitable enforcement. So think using cameras to enforce speed and red light running, enhancing maintenance by improving inventories, prioritizing safety needs, and improving communication on maintenance to the public, and ensuring construction plans and practices for county and private projects are as safe as possible. Looking towards engagement, we identified the following 4 action items, and that's continuously seeking and incorporating feedback from the community on safety to keep the conversation going once the Vision Zero action plan is in place. So that includes prioritizing engagement with vulnerable communities, establishing clear channels for community members to report safety issues and providing timely responses to that input, increasing awareness of the Vision Zero safety program and projects through the website updates, through county emails and communication pushes, and last, building community knowledge through strategic and accessible education programs. And then our last category is partnerships, because county staff can't get to zero alone. So by working with other agencies, organizations, and the community, especially as identified in these 8 action items, we hope to achieve that safer transportation network. So that includes collaborating across the county's departments, ensuring that all county plans and policies acknowledge the Vision Zero program goals and contribute to safety and equitable transportation, coordinating with VDOT on safety issues on roadways that are maintained by the state, which is huge. It's a huge piece of the puzzle because a lot of our high injury network is VDOT maintained. Partnering with neighboring agencies and jurisdictions on safety issues, advancing legislative solutions for transportation safety, and that's at the county board level and at the General Assembly level. Collaborating with local stakeholder organizations like this commission and all of our committees and commissions to be ambassadors to the community and assisting with education and engagement efforts. So that's something we really want our external stakeholder group organizations to be involved in and help us execute this plan, help us be those, arms into the community and spread that community culture of safety. We also want to work with county contractors to ensure that their work aligns with our safety priorities. And last, working with transportation service providers like Uber, Lyft, rideshare companies, scooter companies, delivery companies, taxis, to ensure that their company policies and operating procedures address known safety issues. So again, more detail on specific action items and timelines and responsibilities for these are provided in the Vision Zero Action Plan draft and on the website. So all that said, what does Vision Zero look like? Once we do all of these items, what happens? What do our roads look like? And these are just some examples. You can see intersection enhancements like this protected intersection example from our neighbor Silver Spring. More education and encouragement programs like traffic gardens or, messaging from ACPD or from the county to encourage safer practices, curb space policies, bus lanes, reallocation of road space, collaboration with partners like trucking companies or service providers, improve warning signs, making our network navigable and safe and intuitive. So, it'll take time to see these improvements on every single street in the county, but in the meantime, we're going to be reporting our progress on the Vision Zero program and bringing you, the community, along with us. So we'll be updating the Vision Zero website. We'll be sending out emails, and we'll be really letting people know what we're doing to help us get to a point where you can recognize that we're a Vision Zero city on the streets, which, a lot of places we're very close, and other places we have some work to do. So, we're really excited to be diving into this program. And then in addition to all the updates we'll be providing, in our annual progress reports and through all the project updates on our website, we've also created a crash analysis dashboard. So you can review crash data and trends in Arlington anytime. So the dashboard's an interactive tool that pulls directly from VDOT's crash database. You can sort crashes by mode, year, severity, or collision type, and you can look at trends over time. There's a user guide up on the website too to help navigate the tool, and we're really excited for the community to be testing it out. So moving forward, the engagement period is open through the end of February. Please encourage your communities to engage with us. We really want to hear from folks. And once all the feedback is collected, we'll incorporate your comments to arrive at the final Vision Zero action plan that the county board will vote to adopt in the spring of 2021 this year. And then once the action plan is in place, our interdepartmental staff will continue to meet and work together to execute and report out on the action items. We'll publish an annual report with detailed summaries of what we'd accomplished and what's next. We'll host an annual external stakeholders meeting that is open to the public to gather feedback on how we're doing, and we'll have a mid-year check-in as well. And we'll continue to keep folks involved as the program activities happen. And we're also asking for some resources in the CIP. So this is something that we've really appreciated all of the feedback and insights and community engagement on, and we're excited about this draft plan and also very interested to hear your feedback. So I'll stop here and take any questions or your comments.
Great, thank you much, Ms. Baker. Let's see what commissioners we've got here. Commissioner Muradovic had his hand up first. Go ahead, Commissioner Muradovic.
All right, thank you for that great presentation. One question that I had, thing that jumped out at me was that it said that you looked at peer cities and their Vision Zero programs. And I'm curious what those cities are. And the reason I ask is because unfortunately, a lot of cities in the US, including the city right across the river from us, DC, have these great plans. They're unveiled very promisingly, and then they don't deliver. And so I was wondering, what cities did you look at, and kind of what lessons did you learn where the hang up is in terms of actually implementing a lot of these policies?
So our peer cities were Cambridge, Massachusetts, Richmond, Virginia, Denver, Colorado, San Francisco, California, and Seattle, Washington. And we picked those for various reasons. Cambridge and Richmond are kind of smaller scale, more similar to Arlington's population. And Richmond has a lot of the same challenges that we have because they're within the same state. So they have the same laws. They also work with VDOT. And then we did see a lot of the really interesting and innovative things that places like Denver and San Francisco and Seattle, we're taking on. So we, learned a lot from, not only reviewing their plans, but also speaking with their staff. A lot of them recommended things like, really needing that leadership commitment, needing that top-down support to make their program successful. And, they really talked about having a balanced approach. So having both strategy, but also the ability to adapt your plan to help, change with the changing needs of the environment. And they all were very focused in on public health, on equity, and they mentioned, that the focus on the high injury network was also a really big piece of the work that they do. So, it helps us kind of focus in our program. And in addition to looking at those peer cities, we are also really active in coordinating with the local Vision Zero agencies. So that's Alexandria, Montgomery County, DDOT, and Prince George's. And we meet every other month and take lessons learned from each other. So that's really another great outlet where we get to kind of learn from their lessons and share what we found out. We've, luckily we're coming behind. We're not the first in the area, so we do have a lot of lessons learned that we've heard from our partners.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you very much. I've had a chance to to review the data plans and took a look over the action plan. And I have a similar comment to what I offered to Mr. Dooley about the community energy plan. We have a great master transportation plan that has some great stuff in a bike element that is nearly 2 years old and has languished without implementation. It had a lot of line items about new design and screening criteria to identify a priority network, and it just simply has not been acted upon. I don't really see anything in this action plan that helps along implementation of that and elements of the pedestrian plan that have also languished, other than it looks like there's a placeholder to basically rewrite the master transportation plan. What are we going to do about the bike element of the master transportation plan in the context of Vision Zero?
So as part of the Vision Zero program, we are talking about, I mean, this ties into our repaving process. It ties into our site development process. And it also ties into programming safety projects specifically. So, you know, the way we have designed the repaving process and the site planning process is to integrate those items as we make changes to the network or when new development comes along. So in that regard, Vision Zero doesn't impact those projects coming onto our streets, but it ensures that they happen as safely as possible. So we want to make sure Vision Zero is about ensuring that the things that we are doing are happening as taking safety into account and putting safety first. And I believe that, sorry, I lost my train of thought. We will also be identifying specific safety projects. So where there is a safety need, where we see high levels of, you know, severe injuries or high levels of crashes, that's where we'll be identifying projects that will move through the pipeline expedited because we see that safety need. And that can include elements that are in the pedestrian or the bicycle plan. So it's not, you know, per se, we're picking out specific projects and sending them along. We are identifying projects based on a safety need. And then, you know, a lot of those projects will probably be things that are in plans. But I think, you know, that those plans are designed to go through the county process as well. And Hui or Dennis, you are might have more to add to that too.
Hi, yes. This is Hui Wang, work with Christine at TNO. We basically take every opportunity possible when we have a chance to look at the road, either through site development or through paving program or through another, you know, project that happens to touch the road. Whenever there's opportunity possible, we look at if we can further along the master plan identified items. So it's not just for bike master plan, for all the elements in master plan. That is our policy all along. And in terms of Vision Zero relationship with the master planning, as Christine has described in one of the slides, we are working with the planning bureau to look to see if we can actually incorporate all the elements together. Because one thing we have seen is when we separate these items in separate discussion, sometimes it makes sense in that discussion. But when you put all the elements together, there may be conflicts or there may be more difficulty of actually having them coordinate with each other. So we are looking to see if we can use safety as a priority and use Vision Zero momentum to see if we can put the master plan better coordinated together. So that is something we are collaborating with our sister bureau, and we hope we can get some movement on that.
Can I quote you on that? Every project, every opportunity. Look,
That is the policy we have been following.
All right, I'm going to jump in here with a few things. So thank you for everyone's effort on this project. I think this Vision Zero action plan is hugely important and that we need to get it right. With that said, I'm going to sit with it a lot longer before I give too much feedback on it, but I do have a few things that I want to get out here kind of early. One, am I correctly understanding that the way the high injury network is determined here is a flat like number of crashes on that segment of the road? Which segments of road just have the highest number of crashes?
We did density. We did not do it by volume because we didn't have volumes consistently throughout the entire county. So it wouldn't have been a fair comparison. That's something we are hoping to do in the future. But for here, for now, we did just a crash density, and we did, it's 78% of all serious or fatal crashes on 7% of Arlington's roadways.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful. So I understand the limitations of not having volume information, but I do think it paints a nasty picture of VDOT, which potentially is appropriate, and lets the county off the hook in a way that perhaps it should not, because you're not looking at exposure. You're not looking at how many opportunities were there for a crash, how many users were going through that area. I think it's important to focus on a street that has 100 crashes versus one that has 10, unless that road that has 100 crashes has 100,000 people traveling through it every day, and the one that has 10 has 100 people traveling through it every day. I think the rate does matter a lot. So I'm glad that is a plan for the future to try and look at a rate versus vehicle miles traveled or person miles traveled or whatever through that area. I think that's really important. I also want to say I really appreciate the work that was done in the crash analysis here. I think it's extremely useful, and I wish it had been done sooner. I think it's very useful. So thank you for all of that. I think the notion of the high injury network, my nigglings about how we calculate it aside, is super important and helpful. But I will say at this point, I am overall very disappointed in how vague and unaction-y I would say this action plan is. I feel like the vast majority of the actions called for in this action plan are like to do additional studies and develop additional processes and notions. It is not what I was expecting given what I have seen in other areas. I just want to, as an example, I clicked on a random Vision Zero action plan at the Vision Zero network. I ended up on Portland's, and they have things like objective, change signal timing and operations to make it safer to cross the street. Commitments, install leading pedestrian intervals at new or upgraded traffic signals on high crash network streets to give pedestrians a head start and make them more visible. Retrofit at least 10 existing priority crossings each year. Like, that is action. That is a commitment. That is having done the work to figure out what the strategies are that you're going to try to improve safety and committing to do them. Like, almost everything that I see here in Arlington's plan is like the precursor to all of that work. It's like this process so far has been a study that's just going to result in 12 more studies. And I find that very disappointing given like how late we are to the game already on Vision Zero and how much community time and effort has been put into the process so far. So I would love any reaction to that notion from staff. And like I said, I'm wanting to sit with the plan more and give you more feedback in the future, but I can't get away from that overwhelming feeling having looked at it so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I I think that this was a struggle we learned from a lot of our peer agencies, was that they were too prescriptive off the bat, and it hindered their ability to make change because they were on the hook to do specific things, and they didn't want to not be able to report out on having accomplished these things. And changing 10 intersections, 10 is just a number, and we didn't want to set arbitrary targets for the sake of setting targets. We wanted to have the ability to address our true problems and address problems not problems, but we wanted to make the system better to, enable ourselves to respond quickly and to respond to the crashes that really matter, and to address issues or circumstances where we saw that could lead to crashes. So we didn't want to corner ourselves by saying we're going to do very, very specific things. We are creating a structure where we can be flexible and agile and work to address the most important or most severe crashes first, and our vulnerable communities first, because you can see a lot of this is about equity, and a lot of this is about engagement, and a lot of this is getting people engaged, and those are really key elements too. That we wanted our plan to be well balanced. We wanted it to have flexibility, and we are going to be reporting out on everything we're doing. So we're still on the hook, because we're going to have to be telling you how many LPIs that we put into our signal system, how many leading pedestrian intervals. And we're going to have to tell you how many miles of repaved roads that we have implemented new, road alignments that have more safety features, and how many RRFBs that we've put in. So we are still going to be doing all those things and reporting out on them, but we gave ourselves room to identify what those treatments are. And, we're really enhancing our communication, we're enhancing our documentation. And those are going to be really big parts that are going to make really big change. And we're, I think really excited to have that, especially coming from such an interdisciplinary, standpoint. So even though it may not look like specific action, it's a lot of action that really needed to happen to bring that community culture of safety to Arlington. And, I think we're definitely open to feedback, and we can look at, adding more specificity into some of these items. But, I don't want folks to be disappointed, because I do think these are going to be really big changes for the county.
Thank you. Commissioner Buck, you're up next.
Why don't you go to Jim and Chris? I've talked, and come back to me.
You got it. Mr. Yeri.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation and doing so much work on this over the past, I don't even remember how long it's been anymore, because it's been so long. I brought this up, I think, with at least Nate at one of maybe the last or the second to last in-person meetings. But one thing I was really concerned about was that we would end up with a long list of action items that don't actually seem to tie back to any root cause problem analysis or root cause problems. And that's exactly what I see here. And that really worries me a lot. I see action, but it's really hard to understand whether or not those actions will actually drive long-term behavior, like long-term changes, or like a long-term net positive impact, if we don't actually do like the hard problem of like writing down what the problems are and what problems we're trying to solve. I feel like we do a lot of dancing around that in parts of the document. We talk about speed, we talk about issues at intersections with turns. We don't explicitly lay down why those problems occur. And I worry that without that kind of like explicit problem description, and like saying that these are the problems that cause these things to happen, like with the way that our streets are designed, the way our streets are built, that we could go through and check off and do a lot of these actions and not actually solve the actual problems at hand. So that's my very early feedback, even though I've been reading through these things for the past year plus at this point. I'm still in the same place with Mr. Slott, where I'm still reading through and getting all my thoughts together. But that's the thing I worried about like at the start. And that's the thing I feel kind of had confirmed over my first glance at this. So that worries me a bit.
Thank you, Commissioner Yeri. Commissioner Lantelmi.
Yeah, I'd like to join with Chairman Slatt's comments. We are late to the table on this, and we have a lot of catching up to do. We do have some data already. I mean, looking at just the map you have up here, clearly we have the focus should be on pedestrians in the corridors. Columbia Pike, RB, Pentagon City. These are areas of problems. Is there some way we get some quick wins? Make sure we have all the walk signals, give pedestrians the head start. That's a reprogramming. That shouldn't be a big deal. We should maybe have some quick wins here of things that get done right away that are in the areas where we are seeing the problems right away. There's a large number of vehicle accidents on the interstates. Well, we can't control the interstates. I'm not sure we need to really be, I hate to put it in these terms because it is within Arlington, but there's not a lot we can do on I-395. That's completely VDOT's control and the state troopers. I'm not sure that's something we should be doing our primary focusing on when we have real problems on streets we can control, where we've identified them, where the pedestrians are interfacing with the cars, and where most of the fatalities tend to take place when it's a car-person interaction. So I guess I'm a bit frustrated by the whole process because it came so late, and we don't seem to have much in the way of quick wins yet, even though we do now have some data that we can presumably start taking action on.
Thank you, Commissioner Lantelmi. All right, we're back around to you, Commissioner Buck.
Yeah, I wanted to build on something you said earlier, and something that both Chris and Jim kind of touched on is in the data analysis. I feel like it seems like a very sophisticated hotspot analysis, and what we don't have is a predictive analysis that we prefer to see under a safe system approach. We have a high injury network that's based on history, but we don't get any insights into the built environment factors that correlate with the crashes. And I would suggest that as something that's needed to back up a lot of the actions and possibly lead to a lot more specificity in what the actions would be. It would be something that is going to help us not make the mistakes of the past. Hate to leap on development review again, but we have a lot going on in Pentagon City, Crystal City, and I fear that we are repeating and replicating a lot of the built environment factors that if we were to go back and correlate a lot of these crashes to built environment factors, we'd find that we are designing new with greater odds of killing and seriously injuring vulnerable road users. I'd suggest as a data action item to work with everybody in the region, because as far as I know, nobody in the region has really approached predictive crash analysis either, to pool all of your data and work on a regional basis to find what the odds are that are leading to crashes in terms of things like, we can look at this map and we know there's an association with the number of lanes. We know there's an association with vehicle miles traveled. We can probably guess on speed. We could possibly even use the crowdsourced data as a proxy for that. We thankfully, fatalities and serious injuries are seemingly random around here and fleetingly rare, and that's great. And that's why I think working on a regional basis to come up with that is going to get us more insights, and we're going to get to a more predictive way to say, what is a safe road? What do we need to do systematically so that when we, in that far off year, when we fix this entire high injury network, we know where we can predict the next crash. We can address the next crash issue. We're not designing 23rd Street South with 5 lanes across when traffic only justifies 3. that would be my recommendation for a data item. I recognize that base data is tough to come by, especially with speed, but I feel like with sort of the traditional hotspot reactivity approach, it's hard to put together a defensible plan.
Commissioner Price.
It is getting late in the evening, and I'll keep my comments concise. Well, I don't want. I appreciate Christine and Arlington County staff for putting this together. I was a representative of the Transit Advisory Committee to the Vision Zero external stakeholders group. This was a bear of a project. I complimented Mr. Krim on his parking project, on the parking study, and he did a great job at that. And I think Christine did a fabulous job of putting this together and pulling together all the various disparate elements from the working group. I have to say, it was kind of an overwhelming process of the working group. I think there were so many different elements represented that it made, unless you were a fast typer or quick on the button to raise your hand, I think it kind of crowded out a lot of people wanting to participate in this process. For me, for one, it was very overwhelming. One of the things I see missing from this as a representative of the TAC is strategies to reduce single occupancy vehicles traveling through Arlington, as well as strategies for people to use more transit. I mean, transit's the number one safest form of transportation, period. You want to go reduce to zero, get more people to get out of their single occupancy vehicles, get into transit, and we would cut our numbers very quickly. But I just want this night to end on a very positive note. Christine, I think you did a fantastic job with what you were given. Hopefully we can help beef this up a little bit better, more specificity. I do agree. It is very generic in its action plans. And also what I would like to see is a budget item attached to this. So what is it going to take to implement this? I wanted to say that during our stakeholders group meetings, but it got crowded out. But this seems to be, if you wanted to do everything, really expensive. And if Arlington's willing to put the money for it, I'm willing to review that and consider that. But it's just a bunch of action items, and without a dollar amount attached to some of these action items, I don't know how implementable it's going to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Any final thoughts from the commission? We'll definitely be seeing this more in the future, but it's always great to get any quick feedback or responses that you have early on. Early feedback is better than late feedback. All right. I do want to reiterate, thank you, Ms. Baker, for a great presentation and a lot of hard work on the staff level. I only give my negative feedback in a constructively meant manner because I think this is so important, and I really want us to get it right.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us, and we'll take these comments and see what we can do. Appreciate it.
Have a good night.
And our final item of the evening is item 6. This is other business. One item is our next meeting is March 4th, 30 days from today, approximately.
Great. I also wanted to put out there, I believe Commissioner Wadsworth was our representative on the, oh boy, let's see if I can remember. The acronym is ATAC. ATCT, which is the something Advisory Commission on Transportation Choices. I think that's right. It is a joint work group between APS and the county, working mostly on transportation issues that have an impact on schools. My recollection is that it meets less than monthly, which is pretty great. I think it's every 2 months maybe, and he is unable to do that. So if someone else is interested in hopping on that liaison opportunity, they're doing some great work. I know a lot of it has been around, kind of what does transportation look like, trying to get kids back in schools during COVID. They've also looked a whole bunch at like, how can we take pressure off of school bus transportation by leveraging ART routes and Metro bus routes to let kids take existing transit to school, and a whole bunch of other stuff like that. So if that's something that you're interested in taking on, please don't hesitate to email me. Or speak up now if you want to. And I think that's all I have right now. Anybody else want to report in from any of their liaisoning? Anything else for the good of the commission?
Well, let me introduce a staff member. Bridget Obakoya is someone that many of you know, and she will be giving me a hand with TC over the next couple of months. And so she will be right here alongside all of us virtually, of course, and you will be seeing more of her.
Awesome. Welcome. You're muted, so we can't hear you, but the waving is great.
I'm happy to be here, ready to dig in. And just a little bit about me. I have lived in Arlington for over 20 years in Bluemont, owned a condo there, in Courthouse, building a house in Green Valley. I've just lived all over, and I've worked as a design engineer, so I'm very familiar with the county. My son goes to school here, so we're very invested in the community, and I'm just as passionate as each and every one of you. So I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Not hearing anybody else jump in, I will go ahead and declare us adjourned until March.
Great. Thank you. Good night.
Great. All right. Good evening.
Good night,
Take care,
everybody.
everybody.
Good night.
Good night.